the Line 2 project, which will be coming along at some point in the future, just so we can benefit from the lessons learned before going to the next project.
So if I can, so I have all in favor of that. Sorry, you're going to read it? Do I have to make any reference to the camera? Yeah. And what about the additions?
Motion to adopt.
Yeah.
And once adopted, adopt the item.
Okay. You want to hold it for discussion?
Okay.
Okay. Fitness for duty policy. We no longer have a deputation. Is that right?
No, we didn't.
No, I thought that.
No, there is.
Oh, there is a deputation? Okay, I'll hold that. Supply of safety products. Do I have a motion to approve that or any questions?
I'd move.
All in favor? Done. Item 6, City Council transmittal, Wheel-Trans update on appeal process and service enhancements. Can I have a motion for approval?
See?
Okay, motion for received. Commissioner De Laurentiis, all in favor? Done. Item 7, council transmittal regarding 777 Victoria Park Avenue zoning amendment. I have a motion to receive that as well and approve the recommendations. Anything you want to say, Brad? Nope. All in favor of the recommendation? Done. Notice of motion regarding bilingual signage. There is a deputation. That's a hold. And item number 10, key capital investment priorities. That's a hold. There are a lot of deputations on that. And I'm sorry, I missed number 9. I'm going to ask if the medical officer of health is here, by the way. We'll hold item number 9. So as a matter of I'm considering reordering the items as they appear. Is the medical officer of health here? So we can't hear you. I was going to suggest, if you'd like it, that you would go first, so that you don't have to sit around. Can you field the questions?
Sorry, if I may, through the chair. So yes, I can field the questions because I was the lead director for this study and I'm prepared to speak to it.
Okay, so that's my first suggestion for going sort of a bit off the reservation. And then the other one was that item number 10 has a number of staff and a large number of deputations, and I thought we might deal with that second, so that people don't have to sit around for 2 or 3 hours to speak to item number 10, which is the key capital investment priorities. So that's my proposal. We deal with 9 first and 10 second.
I hate to be the language police today, but could we not use phrases like that either?
Which?
Off the reservation.
Oh, sorry. No, you're right. I'm not, it doesn't have, yeah, you're right. It has the wrong meaning. I apologize. No, you're right. No, you forget. I forgot and I apologize. I'll go off the script. That's better. So do I have support for dealing with that item 9 and 10 first in that order? All in favor of that, changing it? Good. So if we could have the representative, the medical officer of health, come up. And do we deal with deputations first?
Yeah, public speaker.
Okay, so, sorry, we're going to deal with the public speakers first. And we have Hamish Wilson, if he could come forward. Sorry? So then you were right to come up. The medical officer of health can come up. Yeah, we really mean it. So welcome.
Through the chair, I'm joined by your staff.
I'm going to do that.
Can introduce themselves.
Yeah, if you could all introduce yourselves, because the board, not all of us know who all of you are.
Good afternoon. I'm Betty Histurgeon. I'm the acting chief safety officer.
And Stephanie Forte, manager of occupational hygiene and environment.
Okay.
So I'm Gail Bursey. I'm the director for strategic support, strategy and preventive health at Toronto Public Health. And my staff were the staff that did the work on the study. And I'm the lead director, so I'm prepared to take any questions you have. But really, it's a report that these folks have brought before your board, so I'll let them begin, or I'm in the hands of the chair, whatever.
So, you know what, there was some interest in this item expressed earlier before we went in camera, and I think there are questions, although the gentleman who was, Councillor Karygiannis is not here. Is he handy? Yep.
Suggest a way forward is we get a staff presentation, we hear from deputants, and then we go to questions.
There are no deputants.
So there we staff representation.
And there's no presentation. That's why I did it that way. They're available for.
Then let's go to questions and off we go.
That's what, so I'm suggesting, does anybody have any questions? And I actually mentioned Councillor Karygiannis
He's not
because he had told me that he had questions. Does any other member of the board have any questions concerning the item? I think you're going to get lucky today. Okay. Well, I think that's it. Thank you very much for coming.
Easy peasy.
Thank you. Thanks for your work.
So if I could have a motion to adopt the report recommendations. Councillor Carroll. Seconded by Councillor Min Wong. All in favor? Done. Item number 10. So I believe we have a staff presentation on this.
I'll do an introduction.
Yeah, okay.
All right, through you, Chair, I'll just say a few words as staff are getting ready. In just a moment, you're going to hear from our Chief Financial Officer, our Chiefs of Infrastructure and Major Projects, as well as our Head of Vehicle Programs, who will walk you through a report and our plan to allocate the additional capital funds from the city. The plan and recommendations before you today, excuse me, are a result of a lot of hard work from people, and I want to thank all TTC staff who have helped prepare this report for their quick and thorough work. As you will recall, almost a year ago, this board adopted our capital investment plan. That plan was a 15-year look ahead at our capital needs. It was a comprehensive and honest look at all the things that we need now and in the future to both maintain the system we have today and prepare for future growth facing the TTC in the coming decades. This board's unanimous approval of that plan was a critical first step in getting us to where we are today. With our CIP as the roadmap and with the strong advocacy from Chair Robinson, the Toronto City Council, as well as the Mayor, the TTC is getting over $4 billion of additional capital funding over the next 10 years. That's an incredible achievement, and I want to thank the city for that. The additional city building investment means we have secured funding for more than $11 billion in capital works over the next decade. What you will have seen in this report and what staff will walk us through is a proposal to balance essential state of good repair projects with a plan to start expanding and replacing our subway, bus, Wheel-Trans, and streetcar fleets. What I do want to stress is that this report is only a budget allocation. It is not a procurement document. There will be additional reports coming in the remainder of this year. So with that, I'd like to introduce Ms. Levita, Mr. Downey, Mr. Monaco, and Mr. Case if they'd come up and go through their presentation.
To be clear to deputants, you'll have your opportunity after you have a chance to hear the staff presentation.
Okay, so good afternoon, members of the Commission, Vice Chair. I'm going to kick this presentation off and provide a bit of context from a financial lens, and then we'll hear from my colleagues who will discuss a little bit more about the substance of the recommendations. Okay, just as a background, when we last met in December, you had just a few days prior to that December 16th meeting approved a 5-year service plan and a 10-year outlook. And then on December 16th, you had before you the capital investment plan as updated at that point in time, as well as our recommended 10-year capital budget and plan. You had also asked us at that point in time to come back and look at setting our priorities for our base capital needs in time for the 2021 budget process, and to report, though, on January 27th, today, on an accelerated vehicle procurement plan, which is part of this report. So at the time, just again to remind you, what you had before you was a 10-year capital plan worth $7.7 billion. outlined in this chart on the left. And what we told you that allowed us to do was essentially have a $7.7 billion program funded. If we extended our base funding out into the outer 5 years of the capital investment plan's 15-year time frame, that would give us another $2.6 billion, but we would still have $26.1 billion unfunded. So what's happened since then? So as I said, we were before you on the 16th. The following day, City Council unanimously approved an increase to the City Building Fund levy to fund priority housing and transit projects. And at that meeting, directed the city manager and the city's CFO to ensure that the funding was included in the capital budgeting plan that they were launching on January 10th, 2020. And as a result, we were asked to then identify those priority projects that we would include in the 10-year plan for launch to reflect the funding that we were receiving. So on that basis, what you have today is a review of what was recommended by staff based on our priority projects that we've inserted in the plan. It's now $11.9 billion. As a result, the capital investment plan that you had before you has slightly decreased to $35.2 billion, and our unfunded capital needs have been revised down to $21 billion. Okay, so with all that having been said, the approval of the City Building Fund levy actually allocates $4.6 billion to our program. If you recall, when we last met, we had added the Young Bloor Capacity Improvement Project that was deemed to be a priority project amongst the three orders of government, and $500 million would have been the city's share. So we had that as a placeholder in the 10-year plan that you had considered, and what council did was confirm that the city's share will be funded by the City Building Fund. So having put that aside, then that leaves $4.1 billion in extra funding over the 10-year period. Plus, we are also receiving a one-time top-up on federal gas tax of $167 million. Together, that provides us with $4.2 billion to allocate to key capital investment priorities. And this report outlines that $3.1 is being recommended for subway infrastructure and capacity improvement projects, and a further $1.1 billion net for the refurbishment and procurement of additional vehicles. When we determined what those priorities were, of course, we went to our capital investment plan to look at what's been unfunded, and we looked at these three criteria. First and foremostly, we needed to ensure that we were putting projects forward that to be funded that are addressing our safety and compliance issues. Secondly, we wanted to make sure that the funding we were bringing forward could maximize our assets' capability to operate at full performance levels. And then thirdly, and in that order, we would look at projects that address the current and projected requirement for growth. So, as a result, I'm just going to walk you through this one more time based on what you saw earlier. This was the base plan, 10-year plan that you saw that was $5.9 billion back in December. And then to that, we added, take one off, there we go. We added the Young Bloor. So those were the two that you had in front of you on December 16th. Now, when we add our subway infrastructure funding, this is what it profiles over the 10-year period. And then finally, when you add to that and layer to that the vehicle recommendations, that's the top line that reflects our new 10-year capital plan. When you then compare that to what we saw last year, one more click there, Ben. One more. There you go. That's the difference between last year's 10-year plan and this year's 10-year plan. And essentially what that represents is almost a doubling of where we were in 2019 compared to where we are today. So when you look at it from the perspective of the different capital programs that we have, the blue bars reflects what we had in December 16th, and we'll show you where the funds have been allocated by the extension of the red bars. So capacity improvements, of course, are First priority was our subway infrastructure and looking at those critical projects that needed to be funded. And so you'll see coming through this particular graph, the additional red bars attached to the blue bars. And then finally, the vehicles. Okay, so when you look at it from a different view, overall, our $11.9 billion program, next slide please, Bam, shows the allocation of the entire 10-year plan broken down by our major projects. So these are 4 of the categories that are identified here, with buildings being quite significant. And then continue to the next slide, thank you, and capacity improvements at another 35%. This is where our subway infrastructure program is being funded, and the vehicles now increasing to represent almost 19% of our 10-year capital plan funding allocation. So, the CIP, what does this do to the CIP? So, the section to the left now represents the funding by our different categories. It's now $11.9 billion in the first 10 years. When you then look at the balance of the capital investment plan, that now represents $10.6 billion that's unfunded in this first 10-year period. When you take our base program funding, which we had identified earlier as $2.6 billion, and extend it over the outer 5-year period, it means that the balance of the 15-year period is now only $6.4 unfunded. Next, there we go. Okay. So in total, as a result of this new funding, we have $14.3 billion funded over the 15-year period and $21 billion unfunded, which is a reduction from what you last saw. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to turn to some of the details. So when we looked at our overall priorities, of course, we went to our capital investment plan. And our capital investment plan showed in the first 10-year period where our need was for our subway infrastructure state of good repair program, our Line 2 resignaling, and Line 1 and Line 2 capacity enhancement programs, representing $3.7 billion. When we look to what funding we had, the 17% identified in the lower tranche is what was actually sitting in the 10-year capital plan on December 16th that you had approved. And with the $3.09 billion being allocated to subway infrastructure, what this shows you is that 3.7 of our need is fully funded. So 100% of these critical projects are now fully funded in the first 10-year period of this program. I'm going to now turn this over to Ford to give you a little bit more detail about what that includes.
Okay, thank you, Josie. So as the slide states, there's an investment of $158 million to fully fund the subway state of good repair project over the next 10 years, ensuring that obviously, as Josie had mentioned, the priorities are in sync. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to talk about some of the key projects and the advancements that this money will actually do for us. So in terms of asbestos, to provide some context, asbestos was installed throughout any pre-1978 construction of subway tunnels. At the time, all subway tunnel construction methods did include fireproofing and insulating the walls with asbestos. Asbestos removal efforts have been underway at the TTC for several years. However, the Eglinton-Shepherd area is the remaining section of our track where extensive amounts of asbestos still remain. This additional funding will allow for the TTC to determine the feasibility and also provide the funding if, in fact, we are in a position to accelerate the asbestos removal on Line 1. Given the poor condition of some of the asbestos in and around areas that are synonymous with water leaks, while expediting the removal of a known toxic hazard for our employees. Advancing the asbestos removal will also allow TTC to accelerate the Line 1 tunnel liner repairs in the 10-year window and to allow the TTC to develop an eventual North Yonge subway tunnel liner replacement plan, which comes post-2030. In terms of subway track rehabilitation, deteriorated and repeat track components that lead to failures and ultimately lead to nuisance restricted speed zones. Restricted speed zones are even more nuisances when they repeat months after undertaking extensive repair work. as a result of poor asset performance. Certain subway line areas exhibit mud spots, clusters of broken fasteners, and uneven surface rail deterioration, leading to accelerated failures. Our subway infrastructure team will utilize the existing funding to explore modern and proven design and construction methods with the assistance of industry experts to convert problematic tie and ballast locations to the direct fixation type of installations. In terms of track switches, malfunctioning and unreliable subway mainline and yard track switches cause severe disruptions to transit services. Some of our switch motors and cables are in excess of 40 years, and this additional funding will ensure that a fully funded program exists over the next 10 years to support our track switch asset management program to increase the reliability of our assets and offer our customers a more reliable service. In terms of the traction power and wayside communication, for the electrical component of this overall total, many of the subway traction power cables are original and are therefore in excess of 60 years, while some of our traction power substations date back to the 1920s. In addition to the aging cables comes the risk of aging cable pathways due to years of erosion due to various environmental factors. Failure of our traction power system, as you all know, is catastrophic to our customers, leading to power failures and increased risk of track level fires, as witnessed by the November 2019 traction power fault on Line 2 on the Prince Edward Viaduct. Advancing this money in our 10-year window will allow the TTC to work with industry and infrastructure experts to commence tackling a very challenging problem. That is basically how to build new infrastructure when required, install new routings and cables while keeping the system operational for our customers. I am happy to report that the TTC is undertaking a comprehensive study to review and analyze the conditions of our current cables and our 10-year plan to ensure our priorities have been correctly set. On the communication fronts, advancing this money will allow us to continue to complete the installation of train door monitoring on both lines 2 and 4 and align with the future ATC installations to ensure infrastructure is available for future single-person train operation. This additional money will also ensure the maintainability and reliability of our SONET communication backbone and the reliability of critical communication systems such as CSS, SCADA, fire alarm, public address, and CIS, along with all the servers that feed these networks. Lastly, on the tunnel liners and the structural rehabilitation work, deteriorating tunnels leading to concrete delamination and liner deteriorations lead to extensive water leaks throughout the subway tunnels, which in turn deteriorate the corresponding communications, electrical, and signal cables, causing premature failures of the cables, which in turn could lead to extensive subway service delays. Leaks also deteriorate subway rail, which lead to restricted speed zones given the extent of the rail oxidation present, requiring a complete rail replacement a lot sooner than anticipated. In many cases, new installed assets have been installed only to have premature failures occur because of the impact the leak has on the asset deterioration. This additional funding completes the TTC's opportunity to ensure a complete, desired program approach to asset renewal is implemented throughout the system.
Just going forward on to looking at the ATC for Line 2. Now, we need to do this in conjunction with the purchase of new trains to give us the full benefits. Again, previously in the capital budget, before we got the additional money, we'd only 13 million sitting in there to do some study work. Now we've got sufficient funds to take us through the 10-year plan, and hopefully we'll get further funds between 2030 and 34 of 252 million to complete it. If we get that approval, then we can look at how we can accelerate this work along with train procurement to give us a benefit on Line 2. And again, the benefits we're talking about, again, you're talking about a maximum of a minimum of 25% increase in capacity, 15% ATC, and a 10% on the larger trains that we're actually going to use. Next slide. Again, when we look at our Line 1, Line 2 capacity enhancing programmes, we're actually due to come back to the board in Q3 of this year with Stage Gate 1 on Line 1, and in Q4 of this year we're going to come back with a prelim report on Line 2. I'll take you through some of the work that we'll actually be doing on Line 1, but you can replicate that for Line 2. On the fire ventilations, just now we're looking at that using the network rail modelling. We've identified 2 stretches of track just now that actually requires additional facility, upgrading fans and additional facilities. The two areas just now are Eglinton West Station to St Clair West Station, and that includes emergency exit service buildings at Markdale and Glenayre, and also Eglinton Station to Lawrence Station. Again, these are two areas we've specifically developed just now, but we'll be looking through the study. And again, we'll be doing what we call a subway environmental simulation, SES study, to evaluate the facilities at other locations as well during this. When we talk about our stations capacity, we're actually looking at 5 priority stations just now. We're looking at King Street, St Andrews, Dundas, College and St George's. What we're actually looking there, we're reviewing and assessing such things as level of service, i.e. densities, congestion in other words, the vertical circulation elements, fare line configuration, clutter, passenger flow, etc. And we'll also be looking at the dwell time on these platforms. We're not just looking at these 5 stations, we're looking at all stations along as well, but these are the priority stations we've looked at just now. With respect to traction power, again, we'll be doing a load flow analysis on that as well. And currently, we're actually looking at some new midpoint traction substations at 2 locations just now. We've got VMC in Pioneer Village and Finch, and between Finch and Shepherd Station. And again, it's only those 2 at this point in time, but we'll be looking as we continue with the study to look at what other work's actually required to be done. And then the last point is actually looking at our new maintenance and storage facilities. Again, I'll talk about the line 2 first, which is the new Western Yard, which we've actually purchased sort of parcel of land just now, and we're in negotiations to purchase another 25 acres just directly north of that site just now to give us the full capacity we require. And also on line 2, as part of that, we'll be looking at doing an upgrade at Greenwood Yard as well. And the second yard we're looking at is in line 1, and this will be based within the York region. And again, that's to accommodate growth at this point in time. And we're in discussion, we're looking at for parcel for our land or sell, but we're also in discussion with York region. But there's a further element to that we're actually talking with Metrolinx as well, because of the line expansion as well. They've got an obligation to supply a certain amount of storage. We're trying to combine them where possible so we get economies of scale if we can actually find a large enough parcel of land to do that. Okay.
Thank you, Gary. So just back to the numbers. So when we look at the second allocation that we're recommending, it is a net amount of $1.4 billion that we are identifying to be allocated to new vehicle investments. We looked to our capital investment plan once again and looked at the 10-year need, identified here at the top at valued at $5.38 billion. When you look then at what was in our 10-year capital plan, what we had was $515 million, but for vehicle overhauls. At the time that this capital plan was before you, we said that we didn't have sufficient funding to actually acquire vehicles. So instead, we were ensuring that there was funding in the plan to be able to extend their life. So when you take that value along with the additional funding being made available from the building fund of $1.4 billion, what we have essentially done is reallocate or repurpose or reinvest the $500 million, plus added to that the $1.1 billion for $1.6 billion, which is what's being recommended, which represents overall about a 33% dollar value towards the purchase of new vehicles and associated requirements. I'll turn it over to Bam to describe that.
As mentioned, investments in projects that mitigate safety risk are top priority. The procurement of subway trains, whether for end of life, replacement, or for growth, result in added capacity and therefore reduce the risk of station overcrowding. As such, the first priority for investment in new vehicles is to fund the total need for 80 new subway trains, estimated at approximately $2.2 billion as identified in the TTC's capital investment plan. Investment of $623 million funds approximately 1/3 of the 10-year cost of the 62 trains required to replace T1s on Line 2 and for the 18 trains required for system growth on Line 1. In both cases, delivery of new trains is needed to start in 2026. This coincides with the replacement of T1s as they reach their 30-year design life and it coincides with the planned completion of ATC on Line 2. All 80 trains are key for maximizing the benefit of ATC and matching capacity to service demand. New buses and wheel-trans vehicles are required to ensure state of good repair, replacement at end of life, and for growth of the fleets in pace with ridership demand. The CIP identified the need for 1,575 new buses and 498 new wheel-trans buses over the next 10 years at an estimated cost of approximately $4.2 billion. An investment of $772 million in funds approximating one-third of the 10-year need includes 614 buses and 232 wheel-trans vehicles. This provides most of the buses needed over the next 6 years and all of the wheel-trans buses needed over the next 4 years. The chart in front of you is a page from page 16 from the report. Using the vertical bars, it shows the fleet size required to match service demand over the next 10 years, as presented through the TTC's 5-year service plan and 10-year outlook. The dotted line is the fleet size we have today. The solid red line at the bottom shows the fleet size as projected prior to City Council's approval of additional funding. In 2022 alone, there will be nearly 300 buses, 298 in fact, that will no longer be roadworthy. As depicted, without the City Building Fund, there would have been no buses delivered in that year for replacements. The second black line, is the fleet size as projected with the net new funding available now through the City Building Fund, which, as mentioned, provides most of the buses needed over the next 6 years. The capital investment plan identified a need for 60 new streetcars to accommodate growth at a cost of approximately $418 million. While existing facilities can house 40 of the 60 required, the CIP also identified unfunded investment of $85 million for modifications to TTC's Hillcrest property to allow for additional storage and light maintenance. An investment of $140 million from the Canadian Building Fund funds approximately one-third of the total cost for 60 new streetcars. While not a priority for safety or state of good repair, it is clear that growth on streetcar routes demands additional vehicles. Also, helping streetcar helps bus, as there are currently approximately 60 buses supplementing streetcar service on streetcar routes. With additional streetcars, buses could be reallocated back to serving bus network.
Okay, I'm just going to wrap this up then. So the report identifies for you that the allocation of the $4.2 billion in net new funding firstly has an impact on the capital investment plan that was before you. What you had initially was a total requirement over 15 years of $36 billion, of which $10 billion would have been funded and 26 would not have. With these adjustments now, the capital investment plan is $35 billion, with $14.3 billion funded and $21 billion unfunded. By also having had the funding, we were able to reduce the value of the CIP, because in fact, some of the purchases, particularly for our trains, were accelerated. So there's actually a savings as a result of that acceleration. And therefore, that's why it's down by almost $900,000. So when we look at the overall, next slide, Ben, please. So we look at the recommendations that are before you. There's some really summarized here in this chart, and I'll just go through this for clarity's sake. So we are asking that you confirm or approve the adjustments that we're recommending. And firstly, it starts with the infrastructure that we've identified as most critical. It's a total value of $3.1 billion. It's allocated to the following projects. So almost $5 billion, to line 1 capacity enhancement. And that's the value for the first 10 years. It will require an additional $2.7 billion to complete that, but that's not before you today and won't be until such time as Gary reports back and in next year's budget process. Line 2 capacity is $817 million, and it will have a future cost to finish that project of another $3 billion. The Line 2, Line 4 ATC resignaling is $623 million, which will have an additional cost of $177 to complete that project. And so, and then our other subway infrastructure of $158 million, which is within the 10-year period. So we identified these as our most critical subway infrastructure projects, and they are a total of $3.09 billion. To that, we are recommending that 1/3 of the funding for the purchase of subway trains at a total value over the 10-year period at $623 million, which will have an additional $122 million cost for the full purchase of that. With the approval, should we get the full funding, we'll be able to delete the funding we had in the 10-year capital plan of $474 million, which was for the overhaul to extend it by 10 years, and that's being repurposed or reinvested back into this plan. But we do need some money until such time as those trains come on board, and that's why $74 million was added back. The second vehicle purchase recommendation we're making is providing the funding for 1/3 of the purchase of buses and funding for Wheel-Trans in a total of $772 million, and then again 1/3 for the purchase of streetcars for $140 million. That in sum is $1.1 billion that we're asking be added, or a total of $4.228 billion over the 10-year period. That has a requirement in the future years of another $6.1 billion. I would just like to leave for the Commission's understanding is that the estimates, particularly for the infrastructure items, are still our preliminary estimates. And as you heard from my colleague Gary, that he will be coming back with reports to the board later in the year on the stage gating. And should any time any of the full funding not come forward for these vehicles, then we'll be back with some alternate strategies. Thank you.
Should we questions until after deputations? Yeah. So thanks very much. I'm going to call the deputants up now. And we have 4 or 5. Somebody did ask to be added late. Moya Beal. And is there a motion to, I need a 2/3 vote to permit her to... and Emily. And Emily, what's Emily's last name? Emily's last name? Emily Daig would like to be added as well. She just put up her hand. Do I have a vote on that as well? Okay. So I've got to add Emily. And Sean Mager, who had originally been our list and then asked to be put off because he didn't think he'd be able to speak because it was going to be late, apparently is here, and so I've put him back on and am not seeking board authorization to do that. So if we could start with, to start with Joel Sterling, if we could hear from him. Joel, you have 5 minutes. We'll look forward to your presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. 1 week ago, I took the 35 and waited and watched as 3 935s passed by, so I decided to walk up to Weston Road and Jane Street and got the bus from there. While the plan to buy more streetcars and buses is a good idea, the number of vehicles to be bought isn't enough, because if there's a delay, we have to be able to have enough buses to cover the area that's closed on the subway. Not only that, but we need to now, or the riders will continue to be left behind in the cold during the winter months, as buses which are packed pass by, making those who are waiting late. Same goes for the streetcars. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the deputant? And thanks for being so economical. The next deputant is Hamish Wilson. Are you here now, Hamish? You weren't here on item 9. Oh. And I hope I'm saying this correctly. Ho Jung Lee. Yeah, it'd be better if you did for me. Thanks. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
And you have 5 minutes.
Yep. Dear Honorable TTC Board, first, Happy New Year. My name is Hojin Hubert Lee, and I'm a student intern at TTC Riders, a transit advocacy organization. Today, I am speaking on behalf of TTC Riders, myself, and another student intern, Sarah Morgan, regarding the TTC's 2020-29 Key Capital Investment Priorities. It is good to see that the city is recognizing public needs. However, we are concerned that the TTC will not meet public needs because of the unfunded proportions of the capital plan. As student interns at TTC Riders, we have had opportunities to visit several non-profit community organizations. There, we hosted presentations and open conversations about the TTC and its impact on residents. Constantly, we heard the same issues being brought up over and over again. Many Torontonians are struggling to use the TTC as the service is unreliable, infrequent, and unaffordable. For example, a Scarborough resident said that the bus on her route came so infrequently that it would be more efficient to drive. However, as she is a student that relies on transit, driving is not an option. In the proposed capital budget, we see that the TTC is moving in the right direction. However, I want to emphasize that this is not enough. According to the plan, the bus fleet size will not be able to maintain the current service level after 2021, even with the new funding. With the increase of the city population over time, aligned with the growth plan, maintaining the current service level actually means the degeneration of the service level. Resolving funding issue is not something that we can delay, as we already have a good example how the delay made the problem worse. As there was no decision how to deal with the Scarborough line for a long time, now we need to prepare replacement buses until the line to extension is available. We understand that securing budget is difficult, and there are many things that must be considered. However, less buses and streetcars on our roads mean more people will drive, which will create additional congestion and more carbon emissions. Also, the degeneration of the TTC will degenerate the lives of low-income people, seniors, students, and others who rely on transit for their traveling. It is clear that the capital plan is not enough for public needs. Thus, the city needs to find a way to fill the gap between needs and the available funds. Instead of relying on this unfunded capital plan, specifically, we ask the Commission to commit to purchasing more buses and streetcars to prevent the upcoming transportation crisis in Toronto. This is an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of Torontonians by providing the necessary amount of funding for the TTC and for all of us. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, and again, for an economical and focused presentation. Any questions for the deputant? Thanks very much. Next deputant, Milan Tiveldi.
Tiveldi, that's me.
Oh, great, I was close. I apologize if I was too far.
More than okay. Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Milan Tiveldi. I'm also here on behalf of TTC Riders. I'm just here to highlight the need for more buses and streetcars on our roads. Just want to call attention to a couple dates. On December 12th, the TTC board approved a 5-year plan that outlined the need for 1,575 more buses, 498 wheel-trans buses, and 60 streetcars. However, the current capital plan being presented does not reflect the full needs of these vehicles. We're currently only funding 614 buses out of the 1,575. Only 232 wheel-trans buses out of the 498, and a third of the funding for the 60 streetcars is being allocated in the current budget. Again, on December 12th, the TTC also released a report for forecasting subway closures. forecasting subway closures for 2020 and 2021. In that report, it called for more subway closures this year than we saw in 2019 for necessary signal and track repairs. We're also hearing that there's expected construction on certain streetcar lines over the next few years. I agree that these are necessary repairs and maintenance needed to maintain the safety and service of our transit system. However, I want to draw your attention to how these projected closures and track repairs will require the need for more buses to accommodate for those closures and repairs. However, which will directly impact people like myself that are from our West and East End communities that heavily rely on our bus network. As we saw last week with the unplanned subway closure between Jane and Ossington stations, buses were pulled off of their regular routes to supplement shuttle service, which causes service level breakdowns in those communities that rely on buses. I hope the Commission is using the chaotic breakdown that happened as a foreshadowing opportunity for how bus-dependent residents will be impacted in the coming years. We need an implementation strategy that is compliant with the 5-year plan that was approved. And the TTC has an opportunity to show Toronto their commitment to prioritizing transit in this capital plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, another focused, concise presentation. Any questions? No, thanks again. Sean Meager, or Mager.
Thank you. My name's Sean Maher, and I'm with the...
I got him wrong, all wrong.
I wasn't going to say anything about it.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm with TTC Riders, and I also want to talk a little bit about buses and streetcars and the Wheel-Trans buses. First off, I want to say how pleased we are to see the City Building Fund being applied to accelerating and fully funding the purchase of these badly needed vehicles. This is an important part of making the city work, and that investment, I think, is a very promising one. Our concern right now is primarily around the timing. The report in front of you makes an allocation of funding that covers sort of that first third of what needs to be invested, and sensibly enough puts our money on the table firmly before we go to the feds and the province and ask them to also chip in, a pattern that's worked well for the city when we apply it. What's never worked terribly well is asking them to chip in first and holding back our money. So getting our money on the table, I think, is really important. But it's unclear, and especially as I look at the report from today, about whether or not we're going to be able to hit the timeline targets that matter for the purchase of these buses and streetcars. And I want to underscore what one of the presenters said earlier, that the shortage of streetcars means a shortage of buses, because we have buses supplementing streetcar traffic. That's in regular service. When we have breakdowns on streetcar traffic that are unscheduled, we are moving buses as well, and we hear stories from our riders about having to get off a bus because it's got to be moved to someplace else. And they're moving a bus from Scarborough to downtown to cover off a streetcar that isn't working or a subway that's not running. And those are things that I think we definitely don't want to see more of. That's the unscheduled maintenance. There's also scheduled maintenance. We have maintenance happening on the King and Queen and Bathurst streetcar lines that are going to pull buses. We have the Eglinton Crosstown that now is at risk of coming late. So we're going to have a lot of pressure on our buses and on our streetcars over just the next few years. And so a deferral of decision-making around this to later in the year, to the end of the year, is a huge concern. It's really important that we move quickly to move from just a financial allocation to an actual procurement and implementation plan. That we do that as swiftly as possible, and that we signal really clearly to the public who are watching very closely as this unfolds that we genuinely are committed to that 5-year plan that you just adopted a month ago, that we are going to be purchasing those streetcars and those buses on the schedule that this commission committed to 32 days ago, I believe. And that means putting the money down, making that down payment, pursuing the feds and pursuing the province, but making that commitment to deliver those vehicles on that schedule that was agreed to here just those weeks ago. That's important to the public, and it's important to confidence in the plan. It's also important to our capacity to get those streetcars. There are folks watching today's proceedings from Thunder Bay and wondering if they should be looking at winding down that production line or not. A very clear, strong signal that says we are sticking to the timing that was in the 5-year plan. We're going to buy those streetcars on the schedule that we originally committed to will make a difference in that decision making. They don't have money on the table just now, and so strong signals are really going to matter. So timing is of the essence, and I would encourage the Commission to, first of all, move to implementation plans as quickly as possible. Ensure that those implementation plans are designed in a way that fulfills the commitments that were made in the 5-year plan, and then begin implementing that by taking the money that we have on the table and using it to, I hate to use the word because it sounds harsh, but shame our partners in the federal and provincial governments into doing their share. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Thank you very much. Moya Beal? Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Got 5
Thank you
minutes.
so much for letting me speak.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this. My name is Moya Beal. I've been a Scarborough resident for nearly 30 years, and I'm here to ask you, I'm also a volunteer with Scarborough Transit Action, and I'm here to ask you to take another look at the balance that you have between subway and buses. I'm asking you as well to look at your plan through an equity lens, a climate change lens, and a Scarborough lens. As you well know, the award that the TTC won a couple of years ago is based on the fact that the city has a very well integrated system of public transit. And I think from my Scarborough perspective, the workhorse of the system, the bus system, is limping, particularly in Scarborough. We have some of the busiest routes in the city. And I think it's really important to, first of all, take a look at the presentation that you received earlier. Look at the imbalance. Look at the almost microscopic justification for the subway system improvements. And compare that with the justification that you've received for the bus system improvements. You got a little bit of a page, and you got pages and pages of information justifying the subway. But I'm going to give you a little bit more information about the need for buses, particularly in Scarborough. Scarborough commuters are mostly trying to get around in Scarborough or in other parts of the city. The Transportation Tomorrow survey that was done several years ago showed that of all the commuters in Scarborough, only 6% are trying to get downtown. The vast majority of commuters in Scarborough are trying to get around in Scarborough or to other parts of the city. And they're doing that primarily on buses. And they're doing that with 2-hour commutes. It's not unusual for them to have 2-hour commutes. And we have the rare distinction in Scarborough of being the working adult poverty capital of Canada. There is a strong connection between that and our impoverished bus system in Scarborough. We also have some of the busiest streets that result in Scarborough being also having the distinction of the most pedestrians killed on our streets in the city. We don't know why. We don't know if it's because of the design of the streets, the speed on the streets, the number of Ubers on the streets, the congestion. We also have the highest per capita greenhouse gas emissions in the city from personal vehicle use, according to Transform Toronto. Transform Toronto also has a bizarre response for greenhouse gas emissions for transit. It doesn't have a transit plan. It's relying on electric cars. What a elitist, out-of-touch view of the world, particularly for Scarborough. How are people in Scarborough going to be buying electric cars? The city has also made a decision to call a climate emergency. We've got to get cars off the street. We've got to get people to work quicker. And from our Malvern residents, we've got to get access to food security. How many people have we got who are having to walk to the grocery stores because they can't get a decent bus system or a rapid transit system? So there's a lot of dots to connect, and transit is the answer. So I'm asking you to look at your plan through an equity lens, climate change lens, and a lens of Scarborough. Thank you.
Any questions for the deputy?
Lucky me. Thank you. Sorry if I missed something earlier about the air quality. That's something that may help, or the new cars, if we get the money, the new subway cars will help that issue, which is real. With the dollars, we should be drawing a distinction between investment and spending and waste. Sometimes, even though there have been people in support of the projects, some of our larger projects have been more on the wasteful side and not good investments. I would include maintenance as an investment as well, by the way. We have to keep maintaining our assets. One of the things that I noted in this report was a reference to how leaks on the Young Line actually enabled some asbestos to become friable. So that cascades into air quality issues. And that's not okay. It's bad. We have a tendency in many cities, maybe all cities, to have the outer core, the suburbs, tending to outvote the core. And this can present a set of issues. We can feel bled, we can feel overtaxed, and again, we can have the support for the political big projects that aren't necessarily the wisest investments. The Shepherd Line is still costing us, I think, $10 million a year. I don't know what the exact cost is for the Spadina extension past York University, which made sense up to Vaughan, but it's not good use of the capital. As an indication of just how old the issue is, I think it's in here, the suburbs were a little less happy about having some projects on Queen. This is from Unbuilt Toronto. This is an interesting little snippet in that the Yonge and Bloor congestion point was actually well known back, 40 odd years ago, I guess it is. There was such a suggestion of doing rapid transit in the Don Valley of all things. And that, I think, is where we're on an unfortunate set of commitments. We've been shoved down that way, or we've ignored these things. This is from a Metro Area official plan. I have the hard copy here somewhere. I noted that a fine print footnote suggested that the Metro people were fine with surface up to Eglinton Avenue, and then GO would be responsible for an EA to figure out how to make a connection up there. This is back, however many years ago, 95, I suppose it was. So in terms of our billions of dollars of expenditure, including at Yonge and Bloor, if we're not investigating the option for surface options for relief, I think we're being irresponsible, because there's an awful lot of money involved in doing, and it's going to be a complicated project in Yonge and Bloor. And I think we should also have more spine to tell the province no further extensions of our subway system. The main spines are wrong and not good for our core riders. There's such demand, such a set of unmet needs throughout the core. You've got to respect the citizens of Toronto a little bit more and your transit users, please. This is going to be uphill, I know, with the Ford level of government, but we've got to be doing this. And so, yes, I've been upgrading the imagery for a surface option. Maybe somebody wants to squeeze the billions. I'm asking the province if they want to. And you've had a few copies. I'm hoping that we could actually get input into the city at Gerrard area, not Union, not necessarily King, not Bloor. So we need more resiliency and redundancy in our network, which is not happening, unfortunately. With other capital, we absolutely need more vehicles. There's no question about it. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get them, but we also have yards, the issue of where to store them. So please, order all those streetcars, and yes, commit to getting a new yard if that's what's needed. Because some of the expenses that are being shoved into this or put into this allocation are for the less wise extensions. So it's kind of unfair to be harming the city again and shortchanging it without giving, we've got to do things better. With actually enabling the competition in the core, cyclists are still endangered by the streetcar track hazards, not so much these, but this disrepair that's very common and endemic in the margins. It's kind of unfair to have the huge sums.
You've got 10 more seconds.
Yep, spent on the heavy stuff when you're actually making the competition dangerous. Thank you for your time.
Councillor Karygiannis.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the deputant, thank you for coming today. Did I understand you saying correctly that we should not extend the spines subway?
Absolutely, sir.
Can you please identify what you mean by spine?
I mean, line 1 going up to Richmond Hill is a waste of money and a debilitation of the system. The line 2 extension into Scarborough is also a relative waste and not at all wise. If we're having a need for regional transit, we should have regional solutions, not trying to make our milk run form a regional.
Did you say milk run? Did I hear the word milk run?
Yeah,
Sorry, through the chair.
Yeah, well, that's sort of what I call the existing subway system. It's more of a milk run.
Extending the spine to Scarborough Town Centre, that's a milk run. Yes
well,
or no? Please. Short. If you
the milk run, I'm meaning like the Chester, Pape, the core area. When you get out into the more suburban areas, that is faster transit if it gets installed.
So extending from Eglinton and Kennedy through the chair to Scarborough Town Centre, to your presentation, that seems to be a milk run. Is that be correct?
Maybe I've misspoken, sir. That is more of a regional demand that should be met with something like the Smart Spur or the Go.
The people in...
I'm happy to spend money in Scarborough, sir.
Okay, so
through
the chair to you, allow me to finish, please. Extending the subway into Scarborough, to Scarborough Town Centre, and certainly the Shepherd Line, that's a favorite pet project of mine, which Scarborough represents 1/3 of the mass of Toronto, and probably, I would say to you, about 40% of the population. It's a waste of money. Would I summarize you correctly?
That rail extension, absolutely, sir. The subway extension is a waste of money compared with the other options, which, and I've been very much favoring something completely unexplored, is using the Gatineau Hydro.
I don't know if you have to answer. The Scarborough subway extension is not in issue today. We're talking about
just billions of waste, that's all. Okay. And if we're having to...
Sure, I mean, he brought it up. I'm just wanting to get clarification. So, do you have support from Scarborough on this word, milk run, not extending it and all that stuff?
I may have misspoken. I call what our lack of fast service in the core. We don't have semi-express or express subways as New York does. We have milk runs in the core.
Hold on. My question to you is, do you have support on this?
Well, I'm sure amongst some citizens. Thank you, sir. You're doing really well.
No problem. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Ms. Daigle, you're on point and the last speaker.
Sorry to whoever laptops these are, but I'm going to close them because they're not. Well, why are they there? These are made for accessibility, not for able-bodied. Thank you. So very quickly, I have a couple of things I want to say. Is the microphone on? There we go. For one thing, I used to like Hamish Wilson until what he just said, because I lived in Scarborough. People who live in wheelchairs, we know what a one-stop subway is, because guess what? Only Kennedy and Scarborough Town Centre are wheelchair accessible. I would love to have a way out to Scarborough that doesn't take 2.5 hours when you're in a wheelchair. Progress in Shepherd. Thank you. So originally I was going to speak on something much more important to my heart, and that's this. The Wheel-Trans buses. You say 498, but there's only 232 covered. That's less than half. My other problem with that is my wheelchair is considered an extra large wheelchair. It's actually not, but to Wheel-Trans it is. And those buses we currently have, the ProMasters, you can only fit one of my wheelchair. That's it, one. The Friendlies, you could put 4 to 5. You could squeeze 5. The Elf, about the same. The Orion 2s, about the same. My problem here is 232 out of 498. I'm a little stuck on that figure because when you really think about it, the capacity has gone from 5 to 1 when it's large wheelchairs, powered wheelchairs. Friends, people like my friend Mazen, that size of wheelchair, my size of wheelchair. I have a question about this. And this is to Rick. Rick, are you going to come out in a wheelchair and explore the system the way Andy did so you can see it the way we did? I have a challenge for Rick. I care very deeply about you. You're a Canadian citizen now, thank God. But I challenge you. Come ride in a ProMaster in a power wheelchair. Come see how disgusting the ride is in them. The other thing I have are the streetcars. Now, streetcars are near and dear to my heart. As a few of you know, I'm one of the ones that fought for the cherry car to stay down in the distillery after 10 p.m. Now, yes, I lost the name of the cherry car, but now it's the 504B, whichever one it is, I don't remember now. Unfortunately, I lost my apartment down in the distillery due to the affordable housing strategy, so people like me were losing out. I'm stuck in a community where I don't know if I can make it to these meetings because of lack of accessibility, Islington Station, and a really garbage paratransit system where I am. But here's the thing I have to ask each and every one of you. How many of you have tried getting on one of our streetcars from the street in a power wheelchair? It's scary. But then, why haven't we brought taxi script to this system? Why haven't we at least followed in some of the footsteps of Hamilton? I wish Chris, our city manager, was here. He could tell you a bit about taxi script and how it saved our paratransit system in my hometown, and how it's saving the paratransit system in Boston and New York and many other cities like Seattle. Boston especially, you know what I mean, Rick? I tease Rick because he's one of my favorite people and he's one of the fiercest advocates for accessibility that I've met in a while. Between him and Andy, we've had 2 amazing chairs about this. And I just want to quickly end with this, and that's that 232 out of 498. Are we going to be contracting out more? Because if we are, I suggest you have a word with the union. And for another thing, and this is to the downtown elites that I followed today, Scarborough is not the end of the world. Scarborough is a huge part of Toronto. I miss living in Scarborough. And I thank you for running a transit system But I also ask each and every one of you, I challenge each and every one of you, come ride the system way we have to ride it. And this is for Susan Reed Tanaka. I love Royal York. It is beautiful. I've been playing on that station for about a month. I took a little video and photos. Thank you. And if you want to know someone that loves and eats, sleeps, breathes accessibility, including that poor old elevator at Queens Quay Station, talk to Susan. You want to know, I've also been, I need you here, I need you at the Metrolinx meetings coming up. I was at the one at the Science Center. And I told them, in no uncertain terms, follow the design standards of the TTC for accessibility. Our standards are top notch, and we need to stop putting a cat at the bottom of the barrel. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, you
Hi, stranger.
Hi. You brought something new to us, well, new to me anyway. While you were talking, I looked up what taxi script is, because I didn't know.
What do you prefer, cab fare?
You would prefer that to what we have, which is us contracting taxi companies?
What I would do, and this is, no. You guys know the accessible taxi debate that's been on and on and on.
Yeah.
You've heard, and I've got to say, Shelley, you've been one of the biggest advocates for us. The whole argument about the wheelchair accessible taxis not getting fares in this city, the whole problem of Uber, the whole problem of that, a big thing that would save a lot of the accessible cabs from dying, from their drivers not making any money, would be those of us of the means, who have the means, that could afford 40% of our cab fare.
Right.
Be able to use a cab, be able to just call up and say, hey, I need a cab. Because it would not only help the cab industry, it would help Wheel-Trans, definitely would take a large load off Wheel-Trans, but it would also help those in need and those who are working downtown. And
right. So it's sort of a supplement to the contract holder we have now, so that when if they're not taking a Wheel-Trans ride,
a lot of
rather than someone looking for an accessible Uber, they'd use a taxi script coupon.
Or Beck Taxi and taxi companies like Beck. Because right now, there's a sad fact that a lot of people don't know about, is that a lot of these Wheel-Trans contracted taxis are actually limiting their time with Wheel-Trans and doing Uber or Lyft on the side.
Yeah.
I've had many of them tell me that if Taxi Script came to Toronto the way it is in Mississauga and Hamilton and Boston and Seattle and whatnot, New York, it would help them. They would stop limiting their hours because they're making no money with Wheel-Trans.
Right.
They're destroying their vehicles. We no longer have proper training for accessible, excuse me. We no longer have proper city mandated training for accessible taxi drivers and minivan owners that are not Wheel-Trans. So I think it's a huge thing, and I think that, and I've been begging for Taxi Script for years and years and years. And I think Taxi Script would really help the industry and Wheel-Trans.
Okay. I'll look into it some more. Thank you.
Thank you. It'd give us a choice.
Thank you very much. So now we move to questions of staff. So Councillor McKelvey, you can kick it off.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I have a feeling we may go to a second round on this one. So there's no timelines presented here, and I realize you're coming back with a procurement plan, but so I'm not sure how this is flowing in time, and is that going to come back to us? Because I am concerned. It sounds like we're now 100% funded for all our subway needs and streetcar. No, but then, this bus thing and 614 versus 1,575 that we actually need, like, when do they need to be there? And is that the need, year 8, or is this the year need in 2 years? So that, and then the other is, I realize that we had a capital plan, you've come back with a second capital plan. So is this on top of that plan, or are we now retotaling?
Through you, Vice Chair. So this is a revision to what was approved in in December. So taking the additional money and doing the additional reallocation. Just for a little clarification, on the subway side, we now have enough money allocated in this budget would allow for a complete overhaul of the Line 2 trains, but it only accounts for about 30% of an overall replacement of trains. So we don't have enough money in the overall budget for complete trains for Line 1 and Line 2. We were able to top that up and say, it happens to be 30% of the amount. On the bus side, it's very similar. So we need over 1,500. The money that we allocated accounted for about 600, which is about a third of the price of all the, all the buses. And then the remaining was the discussion that we had regarding streetcars. And Ben had said it about reallocating the 50 to 60 buses we put out on a daily basis on streetcar to, we had enough money at the end, which equated again, coincidentally, to 30% of the need, which is 60 streetcars, so enough funding for about 20 streetcars. From here, we intend to go back, do business cases, and do an assessment of how long is it going to take us to move forward. I say that because next month we're coming with a report for this board that gives you an update on the bus strategy and an overview of the electric and the hybrid buses that we're just finished up procuring now, and giving you a touch on the pilot program that we have going forward regarding all three manufacturers on the electric bus. So we're going to give you an update on that. At the same time, we have to come up with strategies now. And remember, this money became available on the 17th of December. We weren't in that space of coming in. So now we're going to go back and now really knock our heads together and say, what are the timeframes for delivering with this? We have to also, this will go to the council, then go to the city manager's office. So we continue to stay in discussions with the city on available funding.
So this isn't picking between buses, streetcars, subways. You're asking for a third of all. It's just the way it's presented. You're not saying 30% of the cost of the buses. You've put it on a number of buses as opposed to, but it's still a third of the requirement.
That's correct.
And then so is your thought then that this would be, for example, the next phase of a PTIF program or something like that? So this is the city's contribution, and now that this has been solidified, you can secure the provincial and federal funding that would accompany it?
The intent could be go back to the city and have discussions with the city manager regarding his discussions on other levels of government helping fund this program.
So you feel that you've fairly looked at distribution between all vehicle types through this assessment. It's mode agnostic, so to speak.
Yeah, so we were very cognizant of the organization's need to not sacrifice any one mode. And as Ben said, from a time frame perspective, over the next few years, this will help us get to where we need to be.
So the 1575 buses is the need over 10 years, because this is a capital plan, so that's over 10 years?
That is correct.
And does that 1575 incorporate additional buses that might be needed for an SRT shutdown, or additional buses in the event that there's an emergency shutdown of a subway line, for example? Does that include the buffer emergency bus vehicles that you need?
For the SRT, it does not. It includes buses that'll cover us for weekend diversions and early access in the evenings, because it's the peak of the peak is when we use the most buses, but it does not include SRT.
And there still is work being done by TTC to look at if there is a delay between the shutdown of the SRT and the opening of the Scarborough subway?
That is
We'll have a
correct.
report back on that?
That is correct. Staff are looking at that now, and I believe I'm going to look at staff. It's either late Q2 of this year, early Q3.
Q3 this year, Rick, we're coming back with the SRT.
Correct, thank you.
And then the Crosstown is set to open next year in what time? And somebody had made reference in the deputations, this is late. Is this true?
As far as we know, in our discussions with Metrolinx, it's September of 2021.
And when that opens in September of 2021, how many buses will that put back onto the road on opening day?
The reallocation of buses, I'm going to look at staff if I could. I want to say in the order of, does Mark miss here?
Yeah, there's
Okay, and so that's incorporated into this projection of needing 1575 buses already? Okay, and then the last question is, so in the budget, the city capital budget, that's process that's also happening in parallel, there is a briefing request that I had put forward asking about the distribution of vehicles by gas type or by fuel source, and for example, these buses specifically, because now that we have declared a climate emergency and wanting to be net zero by 2050, how are you accounting for that in the allotment of these new buses?
Through the chair, The procurement plan reported and approved by the board in June of last year for the adoption of green technology included a ramp up of electric buses and otherwise procurement of hybrid electric buses as we prove that technology. In 2025, the plan is to procure electric buses only thereafter, and you'd have a fully zero emissions fleet by 2040. So those targets haven't changed. The ramp up, of course, is slower because with the budget decision before you today, I guess, there isn't enough money for all of the buses originally planned for that 1575. And so, but the proportion of hybrid to electric as we go towards 2025 remains the same. Lower numbers overall, but the same split in technology. That still allows us to gain the experience we need over the next few years.
We're at the 5. Right? Deputy Mayor Minimum.
So our rolling stock plan in this is we're only covering off a third, and we expect the other levels of government to cover off the balance, yes?
I'd say in discussions with the city manager and his staff, our intention was just to allot funding available for a certain number of vehicles and then pass it over to them as they have in further discussions. Whether other levels of government are going to come, I'm unaware of that.
All right. So you didn't, I didn't get an answer from that I understood. So I'm just wondering, we've put a third aside on a third of the rolling stock, assuming the other level of governments are going to come forward and pick up the balance. Is that fair to say? Or is it different?
Again, it's fair to make that comment, but having spent time working through the upload discussions and the onus of responsibility on stated good repair back on the municipality, I can't confirm that they'd participate.
No, I'm not saying that they're going to participate. The model is on the rolling stock that we put up a third. Is it third or 30%?
Historically, it's a third, but in some of the cases, it's half 50-50.
So the model is based on the other levels of government putting up the balance, yeah? For the rolling stock.
That could be deemed correct, yes.
That could be deemed correct.
It's very hard because, the discussions we're having is not with other levels of government.
No, I know you're not having it yet, but I'm saying the report's based on us if we approve this report, the city goes to the province and the federal government and says, we need money, we put up our third, you put up yours.
That's correct.
Great. Okay. There's no trick question in there.
That's coming.
That's coming.
Okay, so is it also fair to say that we are not going to move forward with any procurement until that funding arrives? So we're not going to go ahead and buy all these streetcars until such time, we're not going to go buy them and say, you know what, we already bought them, you owe us X millions of dollars.
At this time, what we're going to do is put a business case together. Excuse me, what we're going to do is put a business case together looking at how can we procure streetcars and buses moving forward. The subway would be the area we can't move forward to buy.
Right, but we're not going to go and put in an order on the expectation that the other levels of government and we're not going to jam them and say, we bought them, pony up.
It's very likely that we will move forward with some type of procurement that would require, because of the need for the TTC and the vehicles.
So we're going to buy them without the other levels of government backstopping us? I'm not. No, but it's.
No, I say
it's
this
a really important. It's very important to know that we're not going to go and make this decision and then go back to these other levels of government and say you owe us, without how can we do that?
Again, through the vice chair, we were going to work with the city manager's office on the funding allocation, and they have discussions with other levels of government.
So, and what would happen if they said no?
Through the chair, may I just add? So, for the purchase of subway trains, we cannot go to the market because we have insufficient funding.
Sorry?
For the purpose of subway trains, we have insufficient funding to go to the market anyway. Where buses and streetcars, if the funding allocation before you today was approved and was approved by council, we could go to the market for up to that amount, but we would not be Up
to what amount?
Up to the 1/3 amount.
So you could buy, so for example, on let's take buses for example, and if we were to, if it was a third, we would buy 33 buses.
So we could go into contract for the 614 buses and no more. 614 buses.
But then the
for which
other
we have
ones,
funding, but no more.
We'd say, we would go to the other levels of government and say, we bought these buses, you owe us the rest?
No. We could not go to contract with somebody without having secured the funding before we go into
So then that would be an arrangement where we would actually be paying, we typically get a third for this, yes? Is that right?
Between a third and 50%.
So we would actually go into sort of new territory where we would be just buying our third and paying 100% for it with no guarantee that the other levels of government would be coming forward.
That'd be correct.
Wow. Okay, so that's very interesting. That's a new pathway that we've never gone on before. So I'm going to actually change topics for a second, and I'll be quick. I'll hopefully be quick.
Well, actually, you're over the 5.
Second round? Put me down for a second. I wanted to ask
Just
about...
keep going.
Okay, I don't want to take a lot of time. 8, and it's because I wasn't getting the right answer from Rick, but ATC is in this financial package. How much is going to ATC? 635 million, and that's going to line. Which line is it going to? Line 2, and that's. Are we done with line 1? Sorry, you're not finished line 1 till, is that funded?
Yes, that's funded. Yeah.
And line 2, so this money is going to line 2. You said 600.
Again, we have.
That's why I held the other item. I had questions on this.
Yes, we have 6 in this current plan we've put forward. There's 634. Yes, but that's not the full funding for the overall.
That's a third of it.
No, that's the bulk of it. You've still got another sum of money to go for the subsequent years between 2030 and 34.
Okay, and is that the full nut? Is that the
If you go out to 2034, yeah, that's the full sum to put ATC on line 2.
So this package pays for all of the line 2, the ATC?
No, only because we're talking about a 10-year capital plan.
Okay.
And it's the money that's in the 10 years sufficient for doing 10 years, but you'll still need further funds beyond those 10 years.
Oh, what's the entire?
The overall sum is 877.
So we're pretty close to the balance, and that's over 10 years. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for the indulgence for the extension.
Councillor Bradford.
Thanks very much. Just a point of clarification, 62 new subway cars for line 2, 18 new subway cars for line 1, 60 new streetcars, 614 new buses, 232 wheel trans. My question is, when we talk about the streetcars, for example, we're talking about the entire package of what we need for streetcars. A third of that, of course, would be 20. When we talk about buses in the report, we identify 614, which is, why is that broken out as the third of the city's need, which I understand is 1,500 or so to maintain our service levels? Why do we call that out as 614 instead of saying 1,500, of which we can do a third at 614?
The Chair, the procurement of buses typically happens in 1 to up to 3 year contract durations. And so it's not a long-term finite project. In fact, it's kind of an ongoing program of procurements. And so the investment of a third of the total funding for 3 years can actually allow you to progress that project, but with a fewer number of vehicles. In the case of the rail procurements, you're looking at a finite project, and in order to enter into contract for the total number of trains you require, you need the full funding amount. So you really are talking in terms of percent funding when it comes to rail procurements, and when it comes to bus procurements, you're looking at the number of vehicles you can buy with the available funds.
The number of vehicles is much higher on the bus fleet side, but lifespan is shorter, we're going through them, so we're continually sort of procuring or bringing them in?
Chair, that's correct.
Okay, that makes sense. I wanted to talk about, since my colleague brought it up, Line 2 and ATC. How did we land on that as a big priority for capital expenditure with the new revenue from city building levy.
And when you look at ATC, you've got to look at ATC and trains together to give you the combined benefit of both of them. That's why we looked at it as a package, because as I said, the trains give you 9 to 10% capacity. ATC gives you a further 15%, so it gives you about 25% overall. That's why we've packaged them together. You wouldn't buy new trains with ATC compatible and put it onto an old signalling system and vice versa.
So I understand and I appreciate that. In December, we directed for you to come back with the list of priorities, and this rises up to the top among other things, but that was unfunded before, and now we're saying as the commission that line 2 is so important and ATC and the new vehicles on that. How did you arrive at that conclusion versus all of the other sort of things that we need to do? We're making that a big priority in this investment package.
It's down to capacity. That gives you the biggest bang for your buck on capacity. Yes, we've still got to, there's still funds in there for fire vents and everything else, but that's the bulk of the money is going towards there.
Okay. I wanted to move into some of the language that we had actually in the report, specifically on page 2, right before you get into the recommendations, you call out that in the event of full funding is not forthcoming by late 2020, TTC staff will revisit its recommendations and report back on alternative strategies. I think this is something that a lot of people have kind of teed up on. Councillor Menon Wong was talking about this too. Does this mean that if the other levels of government are not coming to the table with the third that they historically have, that we wouldn't be proceeding with the recommendations, or would we look at something like a phased approach for ordering?
So through the Vice Chair, I guess it depends essentially on which of the various procurements we're discussing. So for example, on the trains, where we do need it to have it fully funded, in the event that does not happen, we may have to look at an alternate strategy, which is going back to funding overhauls, for example.
Okay, and so that's because, like on the trains, for example, we're doing a full procurement, which requires us to have the funding locked in. If we were doing something like a request for qualifications, that's a different procurement model where you would not necessarily have to have the funding fully baked in order to go out to market with it.
As in reference to buses, for example, that would be true, where we could look at a lower value of buses being purchased.
What have we done any thinking? I'm sure we have, on the impact of phased ordering on the purchase price of the vehicles. I'm thinking streetcars, for example. So we put our money on the table for X amount, maybe we buy 20. How that impacts the ability and the cost that we will be purchasing those vehicles at from Bombardier?
The Chair, there's been no decision as to how we procure, what that procurement strategy would be, and we'd be bringing that forward to the board through a future report. But yes, you would expect to pay a higher unit cost for a smaller overall purchase. So if you went with 20, for example, 1/3 of the 60-car need, you would expect to pay more per streetcar than you would if you were procuring 60.
Okay, I'll see the clock there. I'll pause there. Thanks.
Thank you. So in terms of the questions about, sticking our necks out in terms of the other 2/3, it seems to me, tell me if I'm right here, as I read this package, it seems to me that really the way in which the new CBF funds roll out and change the 10-year plan, we're also really doing a solid endorsement of the 4-line deal that the Premier and the Mayor have made. In terms of doing intergovernmental work to out to get the 2/3, you got the Line 1 enhancements, they want to extend Yonge. The Line 2 ATC is 100% necessary. You really can't proceed with the Scarborough subway without it. And then in terms of the vehicle buys, you're looking at our parts of the lines, enhancing and making it possible to add whatever the 4-line deal is going to add to it and have it all function well. Right down to the fact that we will need more buses and more streetcars to meet the capacity of this new 4-line deal, enhanced overall TTC system. Was that the roadmap you used to figure out where shall we place the new money? That's the way it reads.
So, through the Vice Chair, we clearly looked at the criteria that we outlined, first safety being most, state of good repair, and then, of course, growth from that one lens. But the second lens, I believe, is one in which we looked at the entire value and thought, how could we spend for impact, knowing that that our concern really is around the subway infrastructure as a safety issue, but that it does give the best capacity, improvement opportunities, both for the future and for the riders today on the core. So we looked at the full funding, and it ended up that 75% of it went to our subway infrastructure to prepare us for today and for the future, noting that we also had the vehicles as a secondary requirement, but also a very important one. But with this kind of, I think what we called it was a seminal investment, like it was a fairly significant investment, that we needed to make sure that we were using it well into the future.
But in terms of the spend for impact is the best phase here. In terms of the spend for impact, you can say we're spending for impact for our own strategic needs, but we're also spending for impact here if you're the province. We're, in terms of along the waterfront, what we need in the way of streetcars, whether you're the federal government at the mouth of the Don or Google at Sidewalk Labs, we're spending for impact even for those strategies. So in terms of going forward to say these are some needs, we're actually putting our own money forward here. This is a pretty good intergovernmental strategy. Having added these additional funds, are we not putting you in a better place to go asking for money, cap in hand, than we have done in a long time?
You, Vice Chair, again, in discussions with the city, that is correct, right? Putting our third up, but it's an organization that, it just coincidentally equates to that amount, but the city is pleased with it.
And you're in a better position than you've been, in 10 years. In 10 years, we haven't said, here's our cash up front. Here's our population who have heard and know that they're going to pay their third up front, and they've seen it, and the council has adopted the strategy to collect it. We're in a better position intergovernmentally than we've been for a while.
It's unprecedented.
Thank you. So then going back to priorities, I get the concern about unit price, but in terms of that, in some of the vehicles are in a different position than others in terms of, is this really going to affect unit price if we actually did proceed to use our own cash to purchase the first third? Some are in a better place than others and in a greater need than others. One of the deputies, Mr. Maher, said, which was a great turn of phrase that I hadn't heard before, if you buy streetcars, you've also bought buses, in a manner of speaking. He said, or something like that. If that's the case, could a business case be made that in some cases here, if we can make the business case that we're not too badly disadvantaging ourselves on a unit price basis, that you would proceed to buy some with cash, just so that you can flow out and pace out the amount of time you're going to spend in the procurement and the onboarding of new vehicles, because there's work challenges all the way along. So could a case be made that if you can pick one of those vehicles where the unit price isn't too disadvantageous to be ordered up front, you would just do it for the sake of workflow?
Yeah, following a business case, yes, that could happen.
Okay, and in terms of those needs, we've talked a lot about streetcars in the last couple of years, because every year we have a faction of council that comes forward and says, please order 60 streetcars, and they've done. I think this is the third budget year they've done so. So the supplier community for that part of the fleet is activated right now. They're out there making their own business cases. Does that not sort of move it to the front in terms of you can get the information, because they were all anticipating an order? So we may only have the money for a smaller order, but getting the numbers from all the potential suppliers there is easier with that vehicle than with others. Is it not? At this point in time.
Councillor Carroll, I've given everybody 6.5, and you're at 6.5. I've breached board rules in an attempt to
Can I get the
avoid
answer?
second time around. Yes, you can.
Cool.
I would say that both streetcar and bus, knowing the manufacturers who's available out there in the industry that could make these for us, are both in similar position.
Chair Janice, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Chair, through you to staff. We heard from some people arguing or lobbying us for more buses to buy, and in conversations with them, they're saying, look, you know, what's happening downtown, you need more buses, what's happening on the subway, with subway shutdowns and all that stuff, that we need more buses. Does that hold any water to your estimation?
Through you, Chair. You know, on all modes, we need all of everything, to be honest with you, sir. The buses, absolutely, but I'd say not at the expense of the streetcars that we're recommending as well, while we wait for subway money.
Can you sort of speak to the fact that you're looking at the the buses that are hybrid or electric? And if we were to move, I think you're ordering 50 electric, would I be correct? At 10 and whatever different companies, and you're about to test them out?
Through you, Chair. In 2017, the board directed us, authorized us to buy 255 hybrid electric buses, as well as an additional 60. We have a report coming to this board next month that gives you an outline of where we are with that procurement, as well as the pilot program moving forward on the testing of the three.
We're going to be getting 60 new buses. When it comes, the decision of the board would be made.
Through the chair, we received all 255 hybrid electric buses late last year.
But I'm talking about electric.
And the 60 all electric will be in by the end of this quarter.
Okay, so we got them. In view of these people wanting us to buy more buses, wouldn't it be more suffice to allow for us to test those 60 electric buses and then spend any new money in buying electric buses versus buying this, hybrid electric buses or diesel buses that we have right now?
Through you, Vice Chair, that is the intent, as Ben had mentioned, by 2026, the intent would be to only buy electric buses once we've proven them out, so that by 2040 we have an entire electric bus fleet.
So to the people that say to us that we should be buying extra buses, it corrects to say to them, look, we need to wait that extra time, although some of the buses might be stranded and running double and three shifts until we test out the electric buses, and then spend that money wisely on the new electric buses, because the buses that we're going to be buying, the diesel, have a lifespan of 15 or 20 years. Something like that. Would that be correct? Would I be correctly in summarizing it that way?
Through the chair, the life of an all-electric bus or diesel bus is the same. That design life is 12 years. If I understand the question...
Sorry, the question was, instead of putting money right now to buy those extra buses, those diesel buses, it will be better for us to wait until 2026 and spend the money then versus doing it right now.
So through the chair, there is a premium for the electric bus over the cost of a hybrid bus. This is true. Going to state procurement of only electric buses in 2025 and nothing but electric buses, so that would be about 180 per year for every year thereafter, would be very risky, because we wouldn't have had any opportunity to adopt the technology and understand whether it's viable.
Let me try that question one more time, and maybe we can get it in layman's terms. People are saying buy extra buses right now because we're going to have problems in running, subway shutdowns, and everything else. And some of them are advocating for us to get the buses that we have and some diesel buses. Wouldn't it be better for us to wait until 2026 to see how the electrical buses are operating and buy more buses then versus buying more buses now, conventional buses?
Through the chair, for the reasons I mentioned in terms of the risk that we would be taking on operationally if we did not continue to buy electric buses between now and 2025, no, I do not think that would be wise.
Through you, Vice Chair, if I could as well, we have a good number of vehicles that'll be coming out of service just 3 years from now. We have to take action to make sure that we have them replaced, or we'll negatively impact the service we put on the street today. By 2025, that's the hope, that we go to an all-electric fleet procurement.
So you're advocating then for us to buy more buses that are diesel and, okay.
Hybrid electric bus, that would be correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's it.
I've got the speaker back. You warned me. Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Double jeopardy.
So I just want to be crystal clear from this discussion. We actually could be in better shape with buses through this recommendation because you don't need to secure 2/3 matching funds. You can just purchase 1/3 of the buses if this is approved today. The way it's written, it's saying 613 out of 15. You're requesting funding for 613 out of 1575 buses.
That's correct.
Okay. The second thing I just want to confirm is that there is a report back next month on the status of the electric bus and the success that we've seen in that, and it'll have more specific recommendations in terms of timing and procurement going forward on buses.
Through the chair, the intention right now is to bring forward for information update on that program without specific recommendations, but it would outline much of the information you just described.
So in particular, I guess my question is the timing, because it did say this 1575 buses, but it didn't say when we'd have to buy them, when the procurement is, what's our drop. Because I think if we're going to make decisions about shifting towards all electric, like it's good to know the timing of when these buses need to be online.
So through the chair, if the funding is secured by December of this year, then we would have enough time to procure buses for delivery starting in 2022, which is the next planned delivery date.
And then the last is you've now brought forward through this an additional, I just want to make sure I'm understanding the additional ask over what you had last time. So this is an additional 4.7 billion total of the 6.6 billion city building fund that has just been approved.
So through the chair, it's an incremental 4.23 billion in plan to plan. The use of 4.7, because we already had the Young Bloor built into the plan you saw in December, and then the repurposing of our overhaul money into the purchase of vehicles. So 4.23 extra, which takes it to 11.9 billion total from 7.6 billion.
Okay, and then I guess why 4.2? Why not 5? Why not 5.5? How do we land at 4.2?
So through the chair, that was the value that was given to us by the city. So it was deemed to be a sum of 4.1 billion of net new funding plus the 500 million towards Bloor Young, because if you recall, that was below the line last year. We had placed it into our plan based on the identification of it as being a priority project by all three orders of government when we dealt with the upload report back in October. And then we had the 167 million of one-time federal gas tax funding that was added. But that was the value given to us of the entire city building fund increase approved by council.
So the number was given to you by the city manager's office?
That was by finance, CFO, and financial planning staff, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe.
No, I have one question. This report doesn't give authorization to staff to move forward with the procurement process where they only purchase the 1/3. Okay, thank you.
That was most of my question, is that we're adopting a 10-year plan here, a budget, but these are all large procurements. So in any permutation, you're going to bring the procurement back, or even the business case back before the procurement. Right, we're just adopting the budget. So just one last question. This is framed in a 10-year plan because that's really the way city finance wanted to show the 10-year impact of having the city building fund. And that's important to show residents because they're footing the bill. But in terms of going forward, Would we be, has there been any thought given to, in terms of going out to get the 2/3, what the intergovernmental strategy looks like? Would we be going forward to them, especially right now, we're kind of in we got a minority government at the federal level, where we could further chunk this out? Here's our third funds. But if you wanted to look at this in 5-year baskets, you could take the priority of the vehicles needed, when they're needed, and the various price tags and say, here's what we need to buy. Here's the pace at which you could fund them in both a 5 and a 10-year picture. Is there any thought towards breaking it out like that for the other orders of government so that we're able to meet their unusual positions, whatever they may be?
Through the chair, as CEO indicated, we're working with the city and we'll be looking at various options.
Okay.
We can take that back.
Yeah, so you'll suggest that. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lalonde.
Yeah, sorry, just one follow-up based on the last couple of questions. Do we have a forecast as to when we would be coming back to the board with business cases for any of the 3 modes of transit, like buses, streetcars, or subways? Like, how far into the future do we think that is?
Through you, Chair. At this time, we don't have specifics. We do know, as Gary talked about on the infrastructure side, we know of about 3 reports coming back. On the vehicle side, we just started having those discussions.
Okay, I actually have one question. So this has been an amazing process and outcome to see this report in front of us with the commitment by the city upfront to fund, and it's very impressive. I have to compliment management, and I also have to say it reflects, I think, a change in the climate and a recognition that the time has come that we have to spend money on infrastructure. That's the lead-in. That's my speech. The lead-in to the question is, does staff believe we should do this this is a 10-year plan. In a year's time, a year is going to have gone by. Are we doing this every year? Because we do this on 5-year capital budgets, and my personal inclination is that you should do this every year, and that the capital planning time horizon and subsidy time horizon should have a commitment by the city that's longer than 5 years, and that municipal financing has not had a long enough frame for these big projects and big needs.
Through you, Chair, and then I'll ask Josie to comment. In working with Josie last year when she was with the city and the CIP was presented to the city, the city was very welcome to the fact that they now had a long-term understanding of the need of the TTC. Nobody would have thought 10 months later that the council would have voted to give us $4+ billion. So we intend to continue to update the 15-year outlook with a capital investment plan to make sure the city's well-versed on the organization's needs.
So this is something we'll expect to see every year? Yes?
From a document?
Hopefully we'll spend $1 billion. It'll be a new $4 billion.
Through you again, Chair. From a document standpoint, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Speakers. Councillor Carroll had her hand up first.
Well, I thought I should put my hand up because it might answer Commissioner Lalonde's question. I actually think we do have to start asking for the business cases up front, and we need to sort of move in the way the supplier community seems to be moving, based on the conversation that's been going on with council for so long. The reason I'm moving the motion you see here is our report talks about how we will deal with it if it's radio silence from the other partners by the end of the year. We are going to get a report on, okay, what's our new strategy? But in fact, we have the funds to start moving on some things, and I'm concerned that if we wait till the end of the year, it's going to be a long time before the residents who are really doing the upfront funding, it's the residents out of their pockets that are getting us started here. That we need to be able to demonstrate that we're moving on it. And we can't really wait until the end of the year to see if we get any kind of answer from other governments. So I'm sort of asking that the commission start to prioritize. What it means when it says by May, meeting a business case analysis for action on the procurement plan for 20 streetcars. That's after conversation with the CEO. This is not a motion of my own writing. I've been working over the weekend, getting advice from the CEO, getting advice from the mayor's office. I think we all want to be able to say that you're gonna feel this investment sooner rather than later. And because this is a supplier community that's already sort of mobilized around this, the current supplier, obviously, they've been lobbying because they've got a problem. There's a lag in orders. Other orders of government are just now starting to fund them. The Premier tells them he can keep them working for 50 more years, but he hasn't placed an order. But that is true of all the suppliers who supply this type of vehicle. The business case really needs to be worked up so that we can start to prioritize where are we going with this fleet. So I'm suggesting that we do that one. And the reason I've chosen that one is not just because of door knocking and lobbying, but because you get that dual bang for your buck. We know we need streetcars, and because we don't have them, we're short of buses because the buses are replacing streetcars all over town. And so you really get a double benefit if you start in this particular area. But I won't know until I see that business case. It takes a few months to develop if, in fact, I'm on the right track, pardon the pun. And so all I'm saying is this one is a business case that can be developed in this amount of time, and so it should be developed as soon as possible. If it turns out not to give us the comforting numbers we want to see, no harm, no foul, because we continue our intergovernmental work. I just think that that's important. The other thing is I would love to see the strategy in Q3 as opposed to waiting until the end of the year, because if there are things that we can move on, we really want to see them by Q3 so that we can, as the chair has just said, I'd like to see a really cohesive 10-year plan every year like this. So if procurement is anticipated, we really need to be talking about it in the fall so that we can have a better budget process. We switched to not having a budget committee, and we kind of rushed. Commissioner Bradford and I had a rushed meeting to quickly understand the plan, and a few weeks later, it kind of got upstaged by the City Building Fund. If in Q3 we're looking at some sort of procurement strategy there, a TTC budget subcommittee could look at it if we choose to restrike one. A TTC commission could properly look at one by the end of the year so that we're advising the city's budget. We are the board of directors of this system that exists today, and I think we ought to try and adjust our calendar and how we spend this money so that we remain the board of directors in control of this commission and where it's going with the system that exists today. I'd rather we make the decision, meet the city's timing, but actually be making the expert decision with our expert staff and then meeting their budget calendar. That's my reason for moving the motion.
So
thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm going to put it, I think this is efficient. I'm going to ask board members if they have any questions of the moving party here. I just did. That was me doing it. So does anybody have any questions of Councillor Carroll concerning her motion? Councillor Karygiannis.
So what I'm to understand is that you are punting this to a later time for us to get more clear information in order before we make a vote on getting buses or streetcars or something like that. Would that be correct?
No, I'm actually punting it to an earlier time. If one can do that, if one can punt something in instead of punting it out.
You don't want it done today. I mean,
Well, the reason I'm not suggesting today is because that's not what staff have suggested here. Staff have suggested that we adopt a budget. They go away, and the first time they would be reporting to us is at the end of the year. But in having discussions with TTC staff and quite frankly the mayor's staff over the weekend, we're trying to pull a little bit of it forward and not leave all of it to the end of the year and once again crash into the city's budget timeline.
Councillor, when
This is ahead of what the report says.
okay, but staff is asking us for a budget, and you're saying report back. How does that?
Well, if you adopt the budget today, then in doing the things that I've asked the CEO to do in Clause 1 and Clause 2, He knows exactly the dollars he has to work with on the city side. He also has a conversation to have now with city staff about the intergovernmental strategy to get the 2/3. But what I'm asking him to do is do a little bit of business case analysis to look at what if we are left in the position where to meet our needs, if they're not coming up with the timeline, we've got a strategy to proceed with the dollars we have that we can look at the end of the year in the context of our budget and our instructions. So I'm moving it up as opposed to waiting to the end of the year so that we've got the kind of information we need to adopt our budget and tell the city what's what.
Thank you. So any other questions of the moving part? Councillor? Yes. Councillor McKelvey?
Thank you. Councillor Carroll, just wondering why in one specifically the streetcars and not any of the other vehicles?
Well, because as I've said, you get bigger bang for your buck in that solving the immediate streetcar problem frees up a bunch of buses. So now 2/3 of the fleet see an impact from these new dollars. But also because in terms of developing a business case, the supplier community around it is mobilized. Whichever country and whichever company you're talking about, because they anticipated this was coming from the City of Toronto, grabbing a business case from them, they're sitting on the numbers now because they were waiting for us to do something. So to say to a CEO, develop a business case around this in 3 months, it's perhaps more doable than the other two vehicle types. What we heard from staff is it's definitely more doable than one of the types, but I would submit it's more doable than both the other types because they've been trying to make this case to us all along.
And then the
So
second one is
on each of their doors and say, okay, make your case for a unit price at 20, at 60, at 100.
But the second is for all vehicles, so it's just a few months later to get the full strategy for everything.
Yeah, the second is just pulling this up to a proper budget timing for us to stay in control of our commission.
Councillor Minnan-Wong, I think you had a question? No? Okay. Next speaker.
Me?
Sure, go for it.
Thank you.
Councillor Bradford next.
I have an amendment. You ready? Oh, there it is. Oh, you're just doing it.
60.
Instead of 20, I want to replace that with 60 streetcars? Okay, so I have a concern about moving forward with the 20. I have 4 reasons. First is higher price, because around the table, I think there was a discussion. When you have a smaller order, you're going to pay more, so our dollars don't go as far. The second piece is it's going to set a precedent where we're going to use all our money, 100% of our money to buy streetcars. And I don't think we've ever done that before. We've always gotten matching funding from other levels of government when we bought our streetcars. I stand to be corrected. And then after that, we're going to go to the other levels of government and say, put up your money, and they'll say, we weren't part of this previous agreement, you're on your own. Secondly, if we wait to get the other levels of government on board, we can use that as a leverage piece to say, we've got a third funding waiting for us. You guys have to come to the table. If we buy our streetcars all of a sudden, there's less pressure for them to come to the table. But if our money's waiting, then we can go to them and say, you've got to come forward with this funding. And the final reason, the fourth reason, is because 20 is such a low order, this is constructively your sole sourcing, because there's only one company that's going to be able to bid. And I am fundamentally opposed to sole source funding. So for those 4 reasons, I don't mind going for an expedited procurement plan, but it should be for 60 streetcars.
Councillor Carroll, do you view that as a friendly amendment?
I have a question of the mover. I'm wondering if the mover would like to make it into a friendly amendment. I appreciate the argument that you've just made, but I would like to make that decision having seen the business case. And so if you were to make that an expedited procurement plan, whether 60 or 20, now it's a friendly amendment. I think the decision which way to go that you're suggesting we can make in May if we make sure to know the total picture. And the CEO could give us the total picture if you make that friendly amendment.
Fine. 60 and 20 is fine.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to see the differential as well.
I'm happy to see
It's a
both
responsible
business
thing to
plans,
do.
but I will tell you that for those reasons, I remain fundamentally concerned about an order for 20.
And I will just ask one other question. Do you not remember that when we ordered the very streetcars that are driving around now?
Which ones?
The very streetcars that are driving around now, the low-floor LRVs, that we started by ordering 700 million worth of them without knowing whether or not we were going to have the other funds, and then they came through within 2 months.
I don't remember that.
MP Godfrey helped us get to the total amount, but we actually stuck our necks out. You voted against it, but that is what happened.
My instincts were right then, and they're right now.
So let's remember we have a
except
friendly
that
amendment.
you may call your instincts right, but it worked. We got the money.
I think you've agreed, so we can go to the next speaker. Councillor Bradford.
So this is the motion, and we're all good with this? That's okay. Well, I'd just like to say...
Councillor De Laurentiis has a motion as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll be supporting this motion. I think that what we're talking about, the report in front of us today, really does represent a historic investment in the Toronto Transit Commission and a significant commitment to actually being able to hit the service levels that we've been talking about and planning for over the past number of months and years. And the city building fund and that levy is really the enabling tool that's allowing us to do that. I think when we talk to residents, when we talk to riders of the TTC, what this means to them is avoiding what happened last week on Line 2. That's what it comes down to for people. We're having very interesting discussions about the procurement, about the timelines. All of that stuff is really important. But when I go to the subway station and talk to folks, it really is about that level of service. And these investments are so crucial for us to actually be able to deliver on our commitments with that respect. I would like to thank our staff, our TTC staff, for their work on this since December. And the reason I was teeing up and going on about the Line 2 piece and the ATC is, we have come into $4.5 billion. We haven't come into it, we've raised it. And that's a challenging thing to do. That's a lot of money, it's a lot of resources. And I think all of us as councillors and commissioners have been receiving input from various groups on where those resources should go. And I really do appreciate staff's work top to bottom on allocating and making the case for those investments and presenting it in a report because, I think when it comes to transit planning, when it comes to these sort of investments, you know a lot more about it than we do. So I appreciate the advice and I'm happy to support that. I think that we've heard from the mayor and certainly from the TTC here how important that is for the provincial and federal governments to be matching our investments and coming to the table. I understand that there's different views on how that may have happened historically, but I do go to the report and I look at those breakdowns and I understand that they have come to the table and now is a great opportunity for them to step up. And so we all need to keep that pressure on and turn those screws in the coming weeks and months. I do think that when we look at this report, we still need a lot of money when it comes to the state of good repair. There is still, 21 billion that is unfunded. I'm happy where we are today, but we can't lose sight of where we're going in the future, and we're really only a third of the way with respect to our stated goals. So it makes sense for us to put our dollars on the table, but we still do face significant unmet capital budget needs beyond the new funding realized in this report. So I think Councillor Carroll's motion is a smart one, and I'm glad that we landed on the friendly amendment there because it's really putting us on the clock. I think the risk of kicking this, actually bringing it forward, I think the risk of this going into 2021 was real, and I'm glad that we're going to have that information coming back here to the commission. And I'll just close by saying that this is a huge step forward. It really is. It's something that should be celebrated, but we should also acknowledge that there is still a lot of work to do, and we're going to have to sharpen the pencils going forward. So thanks very much.
Commissioner De Laurentiis.
Thank you.
Motion, so we can have that in front of us while she's speaking.
So what I hope this motion will do is really create the conditions that will bring the other money to the table. We seem to always be going cap in hand, and there's a sense that somehow investment in transit in Toronto benefits only Toronto, but in fact, there's a much broader benefit. So this is a recommendation that we conduct an economic benefit analysis in partnership with the appropriate city staff that will give us the hard data that we can then take to Ontario and the federal government to say, look, whatever money you put into this system, in fact, turns into a more competitive Toronto, a more competitive region, and that's all about job creation and building. And so it becomes, I think this kind of data will allow us to just make it so obvious that the investment is an investment, not a handout, that should make, I think, the longer-term planning just a lot more, the kind that we've just had now, right? What a difference it makes when you know there's money on the table. What we get from the management team is a really clear, constructive plan, as opposed to, oh, we could do this and we could do we could do that. It'd be rather than a hope and a prayer, we're now talking about real benefits. So that's the intent of this of this motion.
Any questions of the moving party?
It's not a question so much as a point of order, because this is a great intergovernmental motion. I think we're just abbreviating for the purposes of getting through this. But I just hope that in the minutes, if you're a federal government member reading our minutes, for instance, that we'll have the full title there, an accelerated vehicle procurement, so that they don't see this as just about subways. We're just abbreviating for the purposes of the meeting today, but we're talking about the whole system. And I don't want somebody from the other governments reading it to suddenly think that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any additional speakers? Commissioner Osborne?
I'd just like to echo what Commissioner Bradford said and add that the lion's share of the discussion today has been focused on the vehicle procurement, but that there's a very, very sizable amount of money going to the legislative, safety, and state of good repair improvements that have been sadly lacking, as we've seen from some of the incidents that we've had, and are really kind of the unsung heroes of a lot of this work that's been done. So I just want to commend the staff, because these are really required expenditures and aren't as much fun as buying new vehicles. So they're not as sexy. That's very true. But anyway, I think it's money that's really, really well spent, and I commend staff for the work on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McKelvey.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I just want to thank Councillor De Laurentiis for her motion. Commissioner, sorry.
Not running for...
Come on, join us, please.
You just demoted her.
So
Your job is too
I think
hard.
we do EAs, and we do socioeconomic environmental impact and assessment for new lines, and we don't really do it on state of good repair. So I think this is kind of a great idea. We did chat about whether we should add in there the economic and environmental benefits, but I do think it's nice to have it clean on economic, because just looking at it in terms of jobs is certainly a very interesting perspective, although I think there's many environmental benefits as well through this sort of upgrade, getting people out of their cars, and that benefits the whole region as well. So I just want to thank you for that. And then I look forward to seeing the report next month or the month after on the electric vehicles. The budget committee, of which Councillor Carroll, Councillor Bradford, and myself also sit on, is very interested in procurement of vehicles, and specifically electric, because we're looking at what we can do to advance net zero in some of the building plans that we have. And so I think at some point we'll also be asking, how can you step up towards accelerating net zero as well? So I just want to flag that. I think that's something that's important to many of the city councillors, of which unfortunately Commissioner De Laurentiis is not one yet.
Yeah.
I think that is all of the speakers. We'll now move on to the motions. The only observation I wanted to make was that I thought the deputants today were terrific. We had a lot of excellent deputations, and I liked that a lot of them were not up to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So let's put up, I'll view it as the joint motion of Councillor Carroll and Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong. The happy motion. So is that considered friendly now?
Yes.
Commissioner? Okay, all in favor? Good. Then let's put up Commissioner De Laurentiis' motion. All in favor? And then I'd like a motion to approve the item, the recommendations as amended by the previous two motions. Moved by Commissioner Lalonde, seconded by Councillor Carroll. All in favor? Done. So now we go back to the beginning. We go to the CEO report. And is it possible to do the Coles Note version?
Yes, I will. I'll give the abbreviated
I'm not sure if that's a
version.
Canadian or American reference. I know it from my childhood. I think it's a Canadian reference.
So what I'll do then is
Part of your education.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So what I'll do then is I'd like to introduce you to two of the newest members of the TTC executive team. One you just met before, but I'd like to do it in this order. I am pleased to welcome Natalie Poole-Moffett, our new Chief Corporate Affairs Officer. Natalie joined us in the TTC on January 6th. So Natalie, if you just stand up and give a little wave so everybody knows who you are, much appreciated. And Natalie brings an extensive amount of experience in media relations, crisis communications, and corporate and community affairs. With over 20 years' experience in media, public affairs, public policy, and government relations. Natalie brings also a wealth of experience in building and leading strong communication initiatives across organizations. And just coincidentally, Natalie was a volunteer firefighter in British Columbia in her earlier career. So I just want to welcome Natalie and thank you for joining the TTC.
One fire.
And the second person, you saw her earlier, and I just wanted to reintroduce Betty Surgeon. I was going to say her name correctly, is the acting chief. You've met her since John O'Grady has retired. Just a little bit about her so that you're well aware. Betty has more than 2 decades of experience in the health and safety field. Most recently held the position of Manager of Safety, Health and Environment Policy and Strategy at the TTC. Betty is a crucial member, I would tell you, of the executive team, always ensuring the safety remains the core value of everything we do. One of Betty's first priorities will be to report back to this board on the inspection orders of TTC properties by the Toronto Fire through a order compliance chart that'll come to the March CEO report. We'll have more on that as well as for next month. Betty's also taken the lead role with the subway air quality file and recommendations that were before this board earlier. So with it, thank you for your acting position, Betty. We much appreciate it. With that, Vice Chair, that'll conclude my opening remarks.
Any questions on the fantastic CEO report that we have all read? Commissioner Lalonde, proving he has read it.
Yeah. Well, actually, I wanted to ask whether we've figured out what caused the derailment last week on line 2.
Through you, Chair, what I'll ask is Fort Monaco to give an overview of the, Jim, if you can give an overview of the event in Fort, you can tell them what the findings were so far.
Sure. So, as you may know, the morning we dispatched 4 trains from Keele Yard. They come out of the yard and go into service at Keele Station. That morning, the 4th train that would come out of the yard had one axle basically on one truck. On the 4th car, derailed just slightly. I think Fort will probably talk about it was in the 30 centimeter range that it came off. The train stopped, proper procedures were followed, we isolated it, and we had to re-rail the train. During that time, obviously, we had 116 buses operating as a shuttle between Jane and Ossington Station. Major disruption to all of the customers that run that line. We did have some great support from not only all of the TTC staff, but Toronto Police really stepped up and helped us with traffic control out in the West End. So it would be unfair to not give them a nod, but I'll turn over the incident root cause to Fort.
Okay, so from my standpoint, through the chair, to the vice chair actually, so we've done some preliminary analysis. We gathered the data from both the vehicle and the track. The preliminary conclusion is basically localized wear on a piece of stock rail. A piece of stock rail is basically your fixed rail, and then there's a switch point that moves. The derailment occurred after the switch point, and it was a localized piece of a localized wear on the stock rail that we think, in essence, created the perfect storm. A slight enough ramp to allow a relatively brand new wheel with a generally higher than normal coefficient of friction basically climb itself up. Luckily, it was at low speed. So we need to basically now, their next point here is we need to either shave this rail down, build it up and shave it down, or actually lubricate it. And then the ultimate solution here in the next 5 to 6 weeks is to replace both the stock rail and the switch rail.
So what are you doing in the meantime to, like, you just go even slower over that piece of the rail?
No, we've shut the yard down until we've taken the necessary, so there's a short-term and a long-term plan, hopefully all going to be done long-term within the next 6 weeks. So the ultimate long-term plan in the next 6 weeks is to actually replace both the switch rail and the stock rail. In the meantime, we're just going to have to make some temporary repairs to that rail, and at the same time, make sure that every single stone is, like, we leave no stone unturned in the rest of the yard to make sure that, this isn't happening anywhere else.
Any other questions? Commissioner Min and Wong.
So this was asked in camera, but it's a public question. I just wanted to tie it off. So we were in camera talking about whether the FOIs and getting information from Metrolinx, and I made the comment that they don't have to give us any information because the ultimate decision maker on providing information comes from the CEO. And I asked staff to go back and look, and I was wondering if Mr. Atlas can probably provide that answer to the committee, whether I was correct.
Under the Metrolinx privacy policy, the president and CEO is the head from a FOI standpoint, so that would be correct.
If he doesn't want information going out, it doesn't go out.
Well, so he'd still be governed by the Freedom of Information legislation. So if you follow the Freedom of Information legislation, that's what would govern both the timelines to respond and whether the information is provided. And if not, then someone can appeal to the Privacy Commissioner of Ontario.
Thank you.
Any other questions of our CEO? Mr. Leary has actually reconsidered and would like to give us a bit of a high-level review of the KPI indicators from the CEO report.
Right, thank you, Vice Chair. And I'd like to let the board to know, and some of you will recall this, that every February and March we start tweaking the KPIs. So those who aren't aware, and I say this because a number of you have reached out to me regarding the KPIs that we demonstrate show on a monthly basis. So over the next 2 months, our operations staff, Jim Ross and Kirsten, we're going to start tweaking some of these, whether it's a wheel trans, some of the concerns on wheel trans, even from the standpoint of the short turns. Now that we've reached where we are, there are some things we have to say, do we need to continue having them on there? We see an awful lot of green checks, for instance. So we're going to re-standardize it. You'll see that, and we'll make the commentary so you're aware of what's happening. Just wanted to pass that along. Thank you.
Commissioner, all in favor? Done. Item number 2, could Mr. Uribe come up? If you could give us the highlights from the minutes, it was an excellent report. Welcome. And if for the benefit of the board, if you could introduce your colleague, just for some who may not know her.
I shall do that. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us today. In January 16, ACAT membership for 2020 elected the ACAT executive for 2020, and yours truly is the chair. With me today, Vice Chair Marian McDonald, and the other Vice Chair who couldn't make it today, Igor Samardzik. So,
look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. So this is just the highlights of the approved ACAT November 28, 2019. So it might be an old news, but we always bring only the approved ACAT minutes to you. So the highlights that I picked up, in fact, this meeting, that was a very heavy meeting with a lots of good things, so I was hoping that all members got the chance to read it. So the highlights for that meeting, at DRS, members received an update from staff on the revised designs for Greenwood, Glencairn, and High Park stations. The revisions came in response to DRS comments on original design proposals. For Greenwood Station, the westbound elevator E2 was relocated to provide lobby space at the concourse level, and the corridor at platform level was widened for increased waiting and passing space. The subcommittee made additional comments re street-level corridor configuration and the bike parking area. For Glencairn Station, elevator E2 from concourse to platform was relocated to improve corridor space at concourse and increase safety and waiting area space at platform level. For High Park Station, the entire station design was revised, resulting in 2 forward motion elevators directly from street level, 1 to each side platform. The Quebec Avenue entrance was revised, moving the ramp indoors and enclosing the new elevators. DRS considered this a much superior design that provided safer access at platform level, ensuring the station can still be accessible even when elevator is out of service. Also, DRS members raised the issue of entrance connection policies in response to recent third-party elevator connections that are not up to TTC standards. Members believe that TTC design standards need to be used by developers in terms of accessibility. The corporate policy on connections would have to be reviewed and go to the TTC board for approval. DRS requested that all third-party entrance designs be presented at DRS. DRS members received an update on the gap fixed project. After some discussions, members recommended that the southbound Davidsville platform, which is a priority 1 station, should move up in the work schedule for the project. At our Service Planning Subcommittee, SPS, members received a follow-up update regarding emergency closures on the subway system and the policy in place to evacuate persons with disabilities. The protocol will be as follows. Announcements will be made for anyone needing assistance. Site staff and the train crew will assist in the evacuation, and in some cases will ask other passengers to help. The ticker tape display panels will advise riders of the situation and what steps take to evacuate. In the event of a full offload, the operator will walk through the train to ensure that all passengers were disembarked from the train. Staff will go to the station platform to ensure that all platforms are clear. If not, they will assist any passenger should stranded to exit the station. Announcements will be made in advance of arriving at a station that is closed so that those needing an accessible station can be accommodated, if possible. In addition, members were concerned that with the implementation of family of service, there will be additional travelers with disabilities and how they would be accommodated in case of an emergency offloads of trains. Discussion continued regarding the designated waiting area and the passenger assistant intercoms. Intercom buttons will have raised braille and calls will be directly to transit control. Service planning also, members received a presentation on the 5-year system plan and the 10-year outlook. A 20-point action plan was presented. Yearly consultation will be done on the plan. At our Wheel-Trans Operations Subcommittee, members received an update on the Wheel-Trans taxi contracts with which were due to be renewed. Feedback from drivers and ACAT were considered when putting together the best request for proposal to enhance service. Members received a presentation on the subway evacuation exercise and planned multiple exercises throughout the year. A subway evacuation exercise was scheduled for January 12 from 4:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. at Finch Station, and a request for 2 ACAT members to participate in the testing was made. Members received commitment from staff to have consistent addresses, pickup and drop-offs location in subway station across Wheel-Trans platforms. There are physical stop information on TTC booking site, information on reservation screens, and information on operator run sheets. Members received update and stats on the progress of family of service and riders. ACAT members raised concerns regarding some issues with the Wheel-Trans scheduling system and if there are any ways to address them in the near future. Staff agreed to provide an update at the next Wheel-Trans Operations Subcommittee meeting, including having dispatch staff to attend as they understand the situation in greater depth. Finally, our next ACAT meeting, to which you are all invited to, is this Thursday, January 30th, at 1900 Yonge, 7th floor boardroom, from 1 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. And that's my report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question?
Okay, thank you. Looking forward.
Pardon me, item 2. We have to have a motion to receive the minutes, don't we? Yes. So a motion to receive the minutes. Commissioner Lalonde, all in favor, done. Item 3, that's been held. I know there's a motion by Commissioner Lalonde arising out of the...
questions answered when we get the ATC.
Oh, you've already had them answered? Okay. So if we can post Commissioner Lalonde's motion. Sorry.
I hate that term. In this line of work,
I would consider that
Okay. Lessons learned. Yeah. Okay. All in favor of that thoughtful motion? Approved? All in favor of the decision made in camera to approve the report recommendations? Done. Item 4, fitness for duty. I believe we have a deputant, Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, you have 5 minutes.
My mom called me Derek. I just want to say by me speaking at this meeting, this shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied, and doing so is fraud. God bless Her Majesty the Queen. Long live Her Majesty the Queen. So in this report it says, the purchase order with external counsel Blake's LLP be extended to December 31st, 2022. TTC is currently represented by Blake's LLP. Blake's was initially retained as a single source contract award. Now, last week at the police board, I actually gave a presentation on how TTC special constables and fare inspectors are not qualified to do their job properly as they are acting under the color of law, imposing municipal bylaws on people. However, they would be fit for duty if they were properly understood Section 32.1 of the Constitution. Luckily enough, however, constitutional law expert Peter Hogg just happens to be a member of the Blake's law firm. Now, I don't know if you guys have any plan on having Professor Hogg come in here and explain to everyone here and the head of TTC Transit Enforcement that, but I'm just going to go ahead and read it myself. Greater Vancouver Transportation Authority versus Canadian Federation of Students, Supreme Court of Canada, 2009. To find the limit is prescribed by law, it must be determined whether the policies are sufficiently precise and accessible. Professor Peter W. Hogg describes the rationale behind the prescribed by law requirement in constitutional law of Canada. Both these values are satisfied by a law that fulfills two requirements. One, the law must be adequately accessible to the public, and two, the law must be formulated with sufficient precision to enable people to regulate their conduct by it and to provide guidance to those who apply the law, such as TTC special constables and fare inspectors. Blencoe versus British Columbia Human Rights Commission, 2000, Supreme Court of Canada said, the logical structure of Section 32, thus the limitations on statutory authority which are imposed by the Charter will flow down the chain of statutory authority and apply to regulations, in this case, bylaws, right, TTC bylaws, orders, decisions, and all other action, whether legislative, administrative, or judicial, which depends on for its validity on statutory authority. One distinctive feature of actions taken under statutory authority is that they involve the power of compulsion, which your TTC special constables and fare inspectors have, not possessed by private individuals. Again, they cite Professor Hogg's Constitutional Law of Canada. Prigden versus University of Calgary, 2012, the Court of Appeal in Alberta said, Section 32.1 of the Charter states that it applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada and to the legislature and government of each province in respect of all matters within their respective legislative authority. The Supreme Court of Canada has interpreted this section to mean that the Charter only applies to government actors and government action and not to purely private activity. I think you'd all agree your bylaws apply to the Charter. Remember what I just said here. Charter applies only to government actors and government action and not to purely private activity. That's what I'm doing when I'm out there. They cite the dolphin delivery case. The Charter operates as a limitation on the powers of Parliament and the legislatures. McKinney versus University of Guelph, 1990, Supreme Court of Canada said, the exclusion of private activity from the Charter was not a result of happenstance. Government is the body that can enact and enforce rules and authoritatively impinge on individual freedom. Only government requires to be constitutionally shackled to preserve the rights of the individual. Now, someone named, I don't know, is Terry Hay in here? I've had a hell of a time trying to get the definition of a bylaw from what's applied to TTC bylaw number 1. So I just wanted to point out that Bouvier's Law Dictionary from 1856, a well-respected law dictionary, bylaws is defined as rules and ordinances made by a corporation for its own government. I am not a part of the TTC Corporation. Chief Saunders himself last May at the police board, in its agenda, gave his explanation as regards the applicability of a bylaw. The provisions of this bylaw shall apply to all members and employees of the service and the board. Now that's over the Toronto Police Service. Read that as the provisions of this bylaw shall apply to all members and employees of the TTC and the board. See what a bylaw is? That a bylaw applies to you people. It doesn't apply to any of us in the acting in private activity. And one thing, Vice Chair Heisey, you never gave a ruling last month on Councillor Karajanis's point of order regarding Waleed Kogali. So I was wondering if you could properly give that ruling now. But you never gave a proper ruling on it.
Into that discussion, we're dealing with fitness for duty.
We adopted the minutes.
And we've already adopted the minutes, which if there was a deficiency, it could have been raised then. Thank you.
But I wasn't here, but I just want,
lawyer's point.
You guys implied that there's a rule that says we can't ask questions here, and that's just not true. Okay?
So,
Vice Chair, time's up.
Yeah, your time is up. If you'd like to make a written submission on that, I think that's a very interesting point.
Well, thank you for
and
saying
I'd
that.
be very pleased to review anything you have that would support the proposition the job of a deputant is to ask questions of each commissioner and not make a presentation.
Oh, it's not our job. You're servants of ours. You're supposed to
I get that,
answer our
but-
questions.
So I'd be very open to reviewing anything you'd like to provide me on your thoughts on that topic.
Cool. What's
You
your
can do it in writing.
What's your email address?
It's on the net.
It's on the net?
Yeah.
No, I haven't been able to find. You want
You can find me easy.
You want me to write to your boutique law office?
We're not going to do it right now.
No, if you're meaning I know your
I'm
boutique
fine
law
with that.
office
I'm
email
fine with
address.
that.
I'll
Okay,
write
so
it to
let's
that.
stop. Let's stop and move on.
No, but do you want me to send it to your boutique law office email
I'm
address? Okay,
fine
cool.
with that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. So I have a motion to.
I have a question.
Oh, you do. Sorry. Okay.
I do.
Great.
This question to staff. So,
Sorry, I thought there wouldn't be
the
any.
deputy actually raised an interesting question. I had a chance to look at this.
Single source, right?
Is this is sole source? The financial. We're not talking peanuts. And I'm just wondering why we can't make the financial implications in the confidential report public. What's confidential about the amount that the budget that we're giving them?
So I would maintain that if the finances that the TDC is expending for expert evidence and legal fees is a factor that is best kept confidential. It can be made public, but I think it's part of the litigation process that could potentially be viewed as positive or negative by the other side and could affect dealings with the opposing party in the litigation.
But, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, we're not disclosing how much we're spending on expert witnesses. We're disclosing the big number. And I didn't recall, and the deputy quite rightly raised the fact that this original contract was sole sourced. And then the second number, in terms of the extension, is not a small number. Anyway, so actually, maybe I shouldn't be asking you the question. I understand your point of view. I am going to I'll speak to this if no one else wants to speak. And I'm going to move that we disclose the financial implications in terms of what the original contract was, the financial recommendations in the confidential report. I don't see why the public shouldn't know. And remember, we should err on the side, this committee should err on the side, and this, I don't know if the citizen members know this, we should err on the side where we can in making information public. We shouldn't start from the position that it should remain private. We should start from the position that it should remain public, and only in exceptional circumstances where there's an absolutely good reason should we keep it private. And I think in this circumstances, because of the quantum, because it was a sole source contract, and because of the additional amounts, that we should make that financial implications public.
I actually have some thoughts on that as a lawyer, not just as a board member. I think it is a relevant consideration to a litigant on the other side how much you're spending. And I think it's something that could be considered something of a strategic advantage to know that, depending on what monies are being spent. And I respectfully disagree with my colleague on this one occasion.
There'll be more.
So do you have a motion then to present?
If I could speak to
yes,
that
sir,
point as
please.
well. I've managed litigation as well. I agree with Vice Chair Heisey's point of view on this. I think it's a relevant consideration from the side that you're trying this issue with as to what your strategy is, the degree of resources you're willing to commit to it. I don't think you should make that public until the litigation is decided, and then it's fine to make it public.
Okay, so just just to be collegial about this, no, if we can agree, then maybe I'll move the motion that once a matter's settled, that the financial implications be made the financial costs be made public.
Okay, so put that motion.
Still, it's just the sum. I mean, if I saw that sum and I was on the other side, I'd be going, whoa, you guys are really serious about this.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, why don't you just hold it, can you hold it down until they get it done then for the rest of the items?
motion I want to put forward.
Okay.
So apropos legal costs, we would, in my respect submission, we would not have legal costs if the province of Ontario had done what has been done in most other jurisdictions in North America, which is to make random alcohol and drug testing of commercial vehicle operators legal. To remove any doubt as to its legality and propriety. And the fact that the federal and provincial government have allowed a vacuum to exist in this respect is shocking to me. I would say that I act for federally regulated transport companies, and there's no discussion at all about the ability to do random drug and alcohol testing for locomotive operators, pilots, etc. And in the United States, it's widespread. And the way to solve this, in my respectful submission, is not to spend whatever it is we're spending on Blake Castles, however much I might like them as one of their former colleagues. I would rather not spend the money on that. I'd rather spend the money on buses and new operators so the ATU can have a larger membership. So this motion is repetition and said before, which is that we support random drug and alcohol testing, that we support the recommendation of the Auditor General, that we have staff contact the government to consider developing a legislative regime that supports what we're doing so we can end this nonsense. That's my view. So that's my editorial. That is my motion. I'm sorry the ATU is not here. Mr. Yule, you've got a chance. Oh, you're on the next item. You're just raring to go. Sorry. Commissioner Osborne.
I fully support this, and I'm just wondering if we should be adding the Attorney General into this.
Maybe, yeah. I'm fine with that. The more the merrier, as long as it gets done. I don't care how it gets done. But I think this is a government that would consider this kind of legislation, and I'm shocked that the previous administrations we've had provincially and the current federal government just can't get their head around what is so obvious to me. So I'm sorry, question? Sure.
Question, perhaps it went scroll down too quickly for me to read all the points.
It's a lot of
but
editorial.
Related to public safety, I think our strong argument is that it's all related to public safety, and we have a mandate and we have an obligation to ensure public safety. So just at somewhere in that.
Do you want to add that? Well, if you want to add a recital about public safety, I'm all for that.
That would be helpful.
That's what's motivating me.
Yeah. So I don't know, is it there? Maybe it's there. But
I would say, as a matter of information for members of the board, my understanding of the history of legislated solutions to random drug and alcohol testing conflicts is that typically it gets implemented after a catastrophe that occurs, because someone didn't get caught.
Question to the mover.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear, this is amendment onto this item, so the preamble actually won't be recorded in the minutes, right?
I don't know that.
So I know you want to add stuff into the preamble there, but only this be it resolved,
I'm sure staff can provide the preamble to the minister. What matters is the minister. I mean, the minutes could repeat the preamble, that I expressed my reasons for bringing the motion, and they were expressed in the following. So I could ask that the minutes, are you okay with that? That I would ask that the minutes reflect the items in the preamble as my justification for bringing the motion, plus the addition of safety, which has been mentioned by Commissioner De Laurentiis, and that's before I hear questions from Commissioner Carroll. Sorry.
I actually have trouble voting for it if we're going to leave in all that preamble. I understand I understand the intent of what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But
well, it's not preamble.
From the perspective of those who are on the other side
Yeah,
of
I get
this,
that.
it's kind of heavy-handed. And then the resolves are so thorough. And if you don't mind my saying, like, I could fold those all into one clause. But we've got clause, support. It sounds like we're really laying the hammer down on what is an ongoing dispute resolution process going on here, in which we heard they were making progress. Now
But they've
it
made
sounds like-
progress, well, it's not much, based on the report I've had, is something like 7-8 years. That doesn't strike me as progress. But I think, look, if you disagree with my reasons for the motion, I'd be very happy for the resolution, for the minutes of this meeting to reflect your disagreement with the reasons that I'm asking be included, and that any board member who disagrees with any of the reasons set forth should put up their hand and be counted. I'm fine with that. I think that's entirely democratic.
So if I could finish because I think I had the floor.
Okay,
I
sorry.
didn't know we were back and forthing, but I thought I had the floor.
apologize. Okay.
I don't disagree with the intent of the motion. I'll just say that again, and I don't disagree with the recommendations, but the way in which we really hammered the point home in repeated sentences, I don't know that helps our staff. That is my reason why I would have a problem supporting the motion if we're going to leave in every single whereas. Not disagreeing that we need these things, but I just think you want to be a little more procedural and a little less descriptive in a motion to just get the job done and give staff the power to go and do it.
Could I ask staff what their opinion is on that, if they're concerned about the inclusion of the items? I think that's a legitimate question. None. Oh, I didn't know that. We see. Oh, okay. So that's informed by council, what council does.
Yeah, that's the
Okay. Well, that's a very legitimate procedural objection to the bylaw if it's not of the motion, if it's not consistent with what council does. So I was unaware of that, Shelley.
Oh.
One possible way of dealing with this is to remove the whereases from this particular motion, but to have staff either in a covering letter or separately outline detailed reasons to the same audience, because I think those are all valid issues that DAG is involved, that other jurisdictions and Western civilizations have this in place and have had it in place for decades. We're the one outlier, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are all valid points that could have an impact.
So I consider that a friendly amendment to make the motion consistent with the practice of City Council, which I think is entirely appropriate. Thank you for pointing it out, and my future motions won't include that. Good, and then I think we have to move, and then we have to approve the recommendation. Oh, right, sorry. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, all in favor of Commissioner Minnan-Wong's motion? And can then, all in favor of the item as amended, as recommended in camera? Okay, I think we're on to our final item. And bonjour, Monsieur Yule.
I thought of doing this presentation in both French and English versions, but as you know, I only have 5 minutes. In the interest of time, only the title is bilingual. I agree with this motion, but I don't think it goes far enough. We are the largest city in a bilingual country. We should do more than only looking at making subway wayfinding signage bilingual. Announcements on the subway system should also be in French and English, just as they are on GO trains, and will likely be on lines 5 and 6. Both Montreal's STM and Ottawa's OC Transpo have bilingual website options. OC Transpo's bus and LRT next stop announcements are in both official languages. We should be looking at doing all these things. As we continue to roll out the vision system on our surface vehicles, we can upgrade the next stop announcements to bilingual on our buses and streetcars. I know this comes with a cost, but if we could be looking at phasing this over the next 5 to 10 years. Using a 5 to 10 year timeline would allow us to lower the implementation costs by including these changes in the RFPs for system upgrades, new vehicle acquisition, and station SOGR contracts. We have done this before. The Blue Priority Seats project was done as a near net zero cost proposal. As part of ongoing state of good repair for the seats of the TTC, some of the seats were recovered with blue instead of the traditional maroon.
There was a written.
The first new vehicles to arrive with blue seats were pre-installed were the articulated buses. Using changes like this, a bilingual TTC can be done fairly cheaply if we do it smartly and over a reasonable time period. Thank you.
That's very interesting, Mr. Yule. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Yule? Any speakers? Commissioner Minowong.
Yeah, I just got a quick motion. That the board directs staff to report back, this is when they do the rest of it, on a wayfinding strategy that reflects local neighborhoods and any linguistic concentrations. So, for example, if you're in Chinatown, maybe you should have wayfinding that's not, you can have French, but maybe you should have Chinese too. If you're up, at Finch and Young, maybe you should have Persian or Korean.
Yeah.
Just makes sense. That's all.
I'll support that. Any further questions? Commissioner Carroll.
I'm sorry I'm being such a bugaboo today.
Sorry, did I do whereases in mine? I think I did whereases, didn't I? Oh my God, the 7 deadly sins.
I'm just wondering.
There is some whereases in my book.
Well, maybe I don't need to ask this. Maybe it's done as a matter of course. City staff ran this one up the flagpole a few years ago and came up with it. They came back with interesting things that council should know before they went down that road, and that's why they ended up just doing it in conjunction with BIAs. But if someone moves a motion like this, is it just a matter of course that TTC would ask the city if they've ever written such a report? Do they have any info? Would they just do that anyway?
So is this about Councillor Minowong's motion?
It is.
Okay.
We went through this very same exercise in economic development a few years ago.
Okay.
And I'm just wondering, I don't need to move a motion if that's the general habit of staff anyway, is to consult. Do you guys have any stuff on this? Yeah.
Yes, it is. Increasingly, we're working very closely with the city staff, particularly now that the TEO office is set up and that kind of thing. So we would, but because you mentioned it, I will particularly do it.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I don't need to move anything then.
Yeah, and I just wanted to indicate, the reason I brought this motion was I have been continually struck. I take the GO system occasionally, and I move from a bilingual to a unilingual English environment in the same building by going up and down stairs. And then I found out, which I was interested in, that the crosstown was going to be bilingual, and that all our new interchange stations, even our parts of them, are going to be bilingual. So we have an inherent inconsistency in our application of the official languages. And my sort of final pitch on this, and it sounds like I don't have any problem getting it adopted, is that if we want to talk to Quebec about not having unilingual signage, maybe we've got to sort of stand up first and show that we're big enough to do it so that we can't lecture them. So all in favor of, we can vote on the two motions together? Done. Yep. And motion to adjourn? Yep. It's been a slice.
Budget document. Some advice here.